Chapter 1848. The transparent barrier enveloped the entire sunflower field, isolating it from the outside world. With this layer of eternal night's fourfold barrier as protection, when Wu Yan and delicate fragrance fought, if there was an impact to the surroundings, the first thing to be affected would be the eternal night's fourfold barrier. And if the eternal night's fourfold barrier was affected and destroyed, Wu Yan would stop. In that case, he wouldn't cause any damage to the fantasy village without knowing it. Of course, the plan certainly couldn't keep up with the changes. Even if the eternal night's fourfold barrier was affected and destroyed, Wu Yan wanted to stop, but it was still unknown whether Delicate Fragrance, who was fighting, would stop or not. However, with Delicate Fragrance's performance, it was impossible for her to stop now. Delicate Fragrance was a person who did things her own way. She wouldn't care whether Fantasy Village would be destroyed or not. Instead, it was better to set up this barrier in front of Delicate Fragrance. Wu Yan is sending a message to Yuka Fujimi. If you want to fight, I can accompany you. However, once the Eternal Night's fourfold barrier was destroyed, he would have to stop. Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian must have already received this information. But Delicate Fragrance didn't even say anything. She licked the corner of her mouth and suddenly smiled. Let's fight, this sentence. It became the opening statement of the highest standard battle in the fantasy village. Buzz. At the same time, the space around Feng Jian Yuxiang trembled, and the sunflower field around her also shook slightly. The ordinary sunflowers actually secreted a force that was difficult for others to detect under this vibration. Like a stream of air, it poured into Feng Jian Yuxiang's tall and delicate body. After a long time, Delicate Fragrance, the flower demon, had become the embodiment of nature. Her existence was equivalent to the entire nature. At this moment, Feng Jian Yu blended into the surrounding nature. Extracting power from nature, she used it to transform herself into the real nature. In such a state, Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian was able to obtain endless demonic power in the truest sense, and used it extravagantly to strengthen her body, improve her physical ability, and the effect of the delicate fragrance in the wind. It was through his body that had turned into nature. He was able to display all of his terrifying physical abilities without missing a single bit. Under Wu Yan's attentive gaze, Feng Jian's fragrant hair fluttered without wind, and a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from her tall and slender body. It pressed down in all directions like an avalanche. Under the influence of Feng Jian Yuxiang's terrifying aura, the sunflowers in the sunflower field all grew crazily. Not long after, they grew to a height that humans couldn't compare to. This was the ability of Delicate Fragrance Fujimi itself, the ability to control flowers. Now, the Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian had completely integrated into nature, allowing this ability to be used along with his own aura, affecting the sunflowers in the sunflower field. As for the earth-shattering aura, it swept in all directions like a gust of wind. The cold demonic aura was like sharp blades that suddenly scattered in all directions, scraping Wu Yan's cheeks painfully. With this aura alone, Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang was worthy of the title of the strongest in the fantasy village. While Wu Yan was feeling this in his heart, Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang raised his head, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and suddenly he took a fierce step forward. Chi! With a thunderous sound, in the blink of an eye, Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang appeared in front of Wu Yan. The parasol with demonic aura in his hand carried a suffocating aura. In front of Wu Yan's narrowed expression, he fiercely chopped down on Wu Yan's head. The realm of being and nothingness. Wu Yan immediately reacted. He took a step back, raised his hand, and a wave of power that others couldn't understand emerged from his palm, facing Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's parasol. Seeing this, Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang actually smiled. The parasol in his hand that contained a terrifying aura didn't retreat, but instead heavily chopped down. Bang! Logically speaking, the realm of being and nothingness should forcibly guide the demonic power surging on Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's parasol from the state of being to the state of nothingness, turning Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's attack into nothingness. However, the imagined situation didn't happen. Not only did the realm of being and nothingness not turn Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's attack into nothingness, but the fluctuation of the realm power in Wu Yan's hand was forcibly dispersed by this attack. Wu Yan's face changed. Delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang actually used pure power to break the realm power. Don't be distracted. Before Wu Yan could react, delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's battle-thirsty and indifferent voice passed into Wu Yan's ears. The real battle has just begun. As soon as his voice fell, delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang raised the parasol in his hand. The tip of the parasol aimed at Wu Yan, and the violent demonic power suddenly condensed there and burst out like an explosion. In the next second, a beam of light with a diameter of 2 to 3 meters, containing a shocking energy fluctuation, like a meteor falling from the sky, shot toward Wu Yan. Wu Yan also knew that now was not the time to be shocked. He restrained the emotions in his heart, and a pair of crystal-clear purple eyes flashed with a touch of light. If it was Violet, what would she do at this time? With this thought, Wu Yan mobilized the demonic power in his body that wasn't as strong as delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang, but it was still extremely abundant. Circles of power fluctuations that belonged to the realm emerged around his body. At this moment, Wu Yan felt like he could destroy the world and burn the mountains and boil the sea with a raise of his hand. This wasn't just talk. The power of Purple's realm was just that strong. She could create everything with a thought. She could destroy everything with a thought. Since delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang could break through the realm power alone, then he would take out the realm power that delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang couldn't break through. Phew. A scorching breath that seemed to carry all the emotions in Wu Yan's heart was slowly exhaled by Wu Yan. Immediately, Wu Yan raised his head and looked at the beam of light that was constantly magnifying in his pupils. The corner of his mouth curled up and he didn't intend to defend at all. His body shook and turned into a stream of light. Under delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's surprised gaze, he directly rushed toward the incoming beam of light. Whoosh! In the extreme sound of breaking through the air, Wu Yan rushed toward the incoming beam of light violently. The realm power surging around his body violently erupted. The realm of being and nothingness. With such a voice, the figure that turned into a stream of light collided with the fatal beam of light. Boom! Above the sunflower field, a thunderous sound burst out, and a violent gale blew out all of a sudden, blowing all the sunflowers below in one direction. This time it was the same level of power, but the result was completely different. The beam of light that was filled with a power that was more terrifying than the one that easily defeated Wu Yan's realm of being and nothingness. This time, when it collided with Wu Yan's figure that was wrapped in the realm of being and nothingness, it quickly dimmed at the moment of collision. From delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's perspective, she saw that the moment the beam of light that traversed the void collided with the stream of light that Wu Yan transformed into, it suddenly began to melt rapidly from the point of collision. Moreover, the melting speed was still spreading to the other side of the beam of light at an alarming rate. During this period, a figure that was like a meteor swept across like lightning, and a part of the beam of light that came into contact with it collapsed upon contact. And it was the kind that destroyed everything in its path. Boom. In the end, the beam of light that was 2 to 3 meters in diameter disappeared completely, but the figure that turned into a stream of light didn't lose its momentum. It streaked across the space and rushed toward delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang. Facing such a violent and direct collision, delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's eyes surged with crazy battle intent. Come on. Delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang raised the parasol in her hand. Violent demonic powers surged out from her body and gathered at the tip of the parasol at an astonishing speed. In the end, the demonic powers condensed into a half-meter-sized light ball at the tip of the parasol. This time it's double. As soon as she finished speaking, the light ball condensed from demonic powers exploded, turning into 2 extreme light beams that blasted toward Wu Yan's face. In the trembling space, the light beams crashed down fiercely. Double magic cannon. This was a move unique to delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang. Moreover, each magic cannon was much stronger than the previous one, which proved that delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang had brought out her full strength. In response, Wu Yan let out a loud roar. The realm power around his body once again became more violent, and he collided with the light beams without dodging. Boom! The sound of an explosion resounded in the air. Chapter 1849. Bang! Amidst the deafening explosion, the eternal night's quadruple barrier, that enveloped the entire sunflower field suddenly trembled. It was as if something had struck it hard and traces of cracks actually appeared on it, Inside the transparent barrier, a dazzling light shone, making it impossible to see the situation inside. However, the violent winds and waves were extremely conspicuous, turning into circles of ripples that constantly fluctuated and struck the eternal night's fourfold barrier, causing the cracks on the barrier to become even more obvious. Under such circumstances, traces of energy fluctuations began to leak out from the cracks on the barrier, reverberating through the air of the entire fantasy village. Holding onto her imperial coin, Ling Meng, who was gesturing at Marissa and Kamikaze Marumi, who were busy rebuilding the shrine, suddenly turned her head. She turned her head to look in a certain direction, an expression of shock and anger appearing on her face. Who is causing trouble for me again? As the overseer of the fantasy village, Ling Meng not only possessed invincible strength within the fantasy village, she was also keenly aware of any abnormalities that occurred within the fantasy village. Otherwise, how could she be the first to notice any abnormalities? Earlier, due to the Eternal Night's fourfold barrier, providing a certain degree of resistance, Ling Meng did not pay much attention to it. Even a lazy person like Princess Ling Meng would not be able to detect any abnormalities. However, it was impossible for Princess Ling Meng to not detect the energy leaking out from the Yongyes quadruple barrier. Originally, Ling Meng was already vexed by the destruction of the Bori shrine. Now that someone else was causing trouble, it was no doubt akin to pouring a bucket of oil onto Ling Meng's head, causing Ling Meng to be thoroughly enraged. At some point in time, Marissa and Fumimaru had stopped what they were doing and walked over to Soul Dream's side with surprised expressions on their faces. Of course, the reason why they were surprised was completely different. Ling Meng, what's wrong? Looking at Ling Meng's expression that seemed to be on the verge of burning with rage, Marissa shrunk her neck and timidly asked, "Your expression is so ugly. Who provoked you?" Ling Meng did not notice anything strange. Marissa only noticed that Ling Meng's behavior was different. As the Crow Tengu, the life shooter Maru had a keen sense of perception. After frowning slightly, he exclaimed in surprise, "Something seems to have happened." "Things?" Marissa was slightly taken aback. "What is it?" "I don't know." Markumaru shook his head. "But something must have happened in Fantasy Country." Hearing this, Marissa no longer had any doubts. Takamaru Fumimaru looked like a reporter who liked to hype up scandals, but every time he discovered a scandal he would rush to the scene at the first possible moment. He wasn't just fooling around. Since the life-shooting Maru said that something had happened, there was a high chance that it was true. Could it be a mutation? Marissa's eyes lit up in excitement. "Great. Finally something interesting happened. It's a troublesome matter." Princess Ling Meng clenched her fists, a look of fury on her face. "This time, no matter who the troublemaker is, I will treat him or her." Having made up her mind, Ling Meng was just about to rush towards the place where she had sensed the abnormality when a voice suddenly rang out from the surroundings and drilled into Ling Meng's ears. "Wait." As the voice rang out, the space in front of Ling Meng, Marissa and Sensei Marumi abruptly split open. A pitch-black crack filled with malevolent eyeballs appeared in the space, imprinting itself into the eyes of Ling Meng, Marissa and Marumi. Then a figure holding a parasol, her long golden hair fluttering in the wind, extremely tall and elegant, beautiful and dignified, slowly walked out from the terrifying spatial crack. "This time, why don't you let us deal with it?" Seeing the tall figure walking out from the pitch-black crack filled with malevolent eyeballs, Princess Ling Meng, Marissa and the life shooter Maru were shocked. "Yukari." The newcomer is the demon sage that they haven't seen in a long time, Yakumo Yukari. On the other side, the highest standard battle in the fantasy village was still ongoing. Hovering in the air, Yukari Fujimi's posture was still as free and unrestrained as before, not even a speck of dust on her body. She held the parasol in her hand and looked forward, the two emotions in her eyes representing battle and admiration fluctuating at the same time. In front of Yukari Fujimi's gaze, Wu Yen, who had entered Yukari Fujimi's red jade mode, with his long golden hair stopped in place. His body also did not have the slightest injury, but the obscure realm power around him seemed to be stirred up. It was not calm at all. Needless to say, in that collision just now, Yukari Fujimi had a slight advantage. In fact, even Wu Yen himself did not expect Yukari Fujimi's strength to be so strong. It was clear that Yukari's level and power had increased a lot after the magical pond water's transformation. Coupled with her godly realm power, she should be able to fight Yukari Fujimi to a draw. However, Yukari Fujimi still had the upper hand. Although this advantage was weak to the point of being negligible, in the end it was still an advantage. Even if it was just a little bit, it could not change the fact that Yukari Fujimi was strong. This was also because the person who controlled the realm power was Wu Yan. Although because of the infinite armory, Wu Yan's speed of controlling the realm power was very fast. The degree of control was constantly increasing, but the realm power was not Wu Yan's own strength, it belonged to Yukari's strength. Even with the red jade mode and infinite armory, Wu Yan could perfectly control the realm power, but in terms of using it he was definitely not as good as Yukari. After all, Yukari had used the realm power for at least 1,000 years, while Wu Yan had only used it a few times in battle. Compared to Yukari, who usually used the realm power in daily life, he was no match for Yukari. Therefore, if Yukari Fujimi were to fight with the current Yukari Fujimi, Yukari was absolutely confident that she could pull the victory to 50-50. But if it was him, Wu Yan estimated, before the red jade mode lasted for a while, he could only maintain a 40-60 chance of winning. Yukari Fujimi's chances of winning were still relatively high. Wu Yan could estimate this point himself. Delicate Fragrance Kaze, who was standing in a higher position, naturally knew about this. However, Yukari Fujimi's fighting spirit still did not weaken in the slightest. It even had a tendency to become stronger. A 40-60 chance of winning? In the entire fantasy village, there were people who could exhaust their strength to fight with her, who was known as the strongest, and still be able to do this. It was absolutely possible to count them with one hand. Yukari Fujimi couldn't remember how many years it had been since she used her full strength to fight with an expert of the same realm. A year? 10 years? Or 100 years? Perhaps not that long, but for the battle-thirsty Yukari Fujimi, even a year was a long time. Now there was finally an opponent who could make her use all her strength to gain the upper hand. Even she didn't dare to say that she could definitely defeat her opponent. Yukari Fujimi's excitement could be imagined. What's wrong? At that moment, Yukari Fujimi's tone also leaned towards fanaticism. Her voice was full of excitement and extremely joyful, reverberated in the surroundings. Can't you do it? Bring out more power. Pursue the existence of invincibility. After saying that, Yukari Fujimi spread her arms as if she wanted to embrace the whole world. Nature responded to Yukari Fujimi's excitement by extracting vitality from nature and turning it into pure monster power that flowed into Yukari Fujimi's body. Buzz. At the next moment, a dazzling flower suddenly bloomed behind Feng Jian Yuxiang's back. Terrifying demonic powers surged on it, gathering together and shooting out flower-shaped barrage that had a diameter of 1 meter as if they were shooting arrows. Let me have some more fun. Along with Yukari Fujimi's fanatical voice, the flower-shaped barrage burst across the sky above the sunflower field like auroras. In the sound of sonic booms, they mercilessly shrouded Wu Yan. Wu Yan could only stretch out his hand and set up the realm power in front of him like a barrier. The realm of being and nothingness. Suddenly, the flower-shaped auroras that shot over disappeared as if they had never appeared before when they touched the barrier of the realm. However, at the same time, more flower-shaped barrage fell and blasted mercilessly at Wu Yan. Don't tell me you're only at this level? While turning the violent demonic power into a barrage of bullets, Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian taunted him with a joyful tone. This is not enough. Not enough. While speaking, the monster power that burst out from Yukari Fujimi's body became more majestic and violent, raising the power of the flower-shaped barrage by more than one level. TSK. Wu Yan was speechless. While continuing to support the realm of being and nothingness to erase all the barrage, his mind was spinning rapidly. If this continues, Wu Yan will definitely be exhausted to death by Yukari Fujimi, who has endless monster power and will never get tired. Therefore the current situation must be changed. There's no other way. Wu Yan's purple eyes flashed with a flash of light. I can only use that. Chapter 1850. TSK. The flower-shaped bullet screen fell one after another as if they were scrambling to be the first to fall. Amidst the tse sound like water extinguishing flames, they were wiped out by the barrier formed by the realm of being and nothingness. Come on. Let's fight. Youxiang Fujian's joyful voice echoed in the flower-shaped bullet screen. Every time it echoed, It was accompanied by an extremely terrifying explosion of demonic power. The rain-like bullet screen that fell like raindrops had a terrifying increase in power and quantity. As the embodiment of nature, the current delicate fragrance Feng Jian seemed to have received the assistance of the entire natural world. Her monster power was endless. Therefore, as long as delicate fragrance Feng Jian didn't want to, the flower-shaped bullet screen would never stop. In fact, its power and number would continue to increase. If it went on like this, the attack made up of the dazzling flower-shaped barrage would sooner or later reach an unparalleled level in terms of power and quantity, and the boundary between being and non-being would be broken sooner or later. By then Wu Yan would also be defeated. In fact, Wu Yan was already feeling a little burdened. The power of the realm surging around his body was already a little lax. The barrier formed by the realm of being and nothingness in front of him was like a heavy mountain, slowly becoming heavier and heavier. Wu Yan's outstretched hand was unable to bear the burden, and it made cracking sounds similar to the friction of bones. But even so, Wu Yan gritted his teeth and held on. After taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes. After reaching the peak of the 9th rank, the duration of Violet's red jade mode had increased to an hour. An hour was enough for a high-level battle where hundreds of rounds could be exchanged in minutes. Not only was it enough to determine the winner, but it could also continue for at least a dozen more battles. Therefore, Wu Yan didn't need to pay special attention to the duration of the red jade mode. Naturally, he didn't need to worry about whether it would be cancelled midway. But in terms of strength alone, the current Wu Yan compared to Yu Xiang still had a small gap. Although it wasn't to say that it was impossible for him to win, his chances of winning were definitely lower than delicate fragrance Fujimi. Coupled with delicate fragrance Feng Jian's extravagant fighting style and the support of her endless demonic power. The longer time passed, the situation became more and more unfavorable to Wu Yan. However, this was not Wu Yan's strongest state. Yukari's red jade mode is the strongest out of the 3 red jade modes he has. However, apart from the red jade mode, Wu Yan had another trump card that could increase his overall strength. Now that I think about it, ever since I exchanged for it, I haven't been able to find an opportunity to use it. It was clear that the burden on his body was getting heavier and heavier, and the power of his realm was showing signs of not being able to support it. However, Wu Yan kept his eyes closed and showed a knowing smile. Now it's finally time to use it. The moment he finished speaking, a burst of bright light suddenly skyrocketed and covered Wu Yan's body. Seeing the bright light blooming on the spot that she used as a target, Yu Xiang, who was wantonly squandering her endless demonic power, was slightly startled. The bullet screen also paused for a moment. This pause time maybe. However, the suddenly skyrocketing rich light suddenly flourished again as if something was about to burst. The flower-shaped bullet screen was all bounced back. Bang! In the muffled sound, the skyrocketing rich light suddenly burst out, cancelling out the overwhelming flower-shaped bullet screen. Then it turned into starlight and dissipated in the air. In this regard, delicate fragrance Fujimi did not react. It would be better to say that if she could defeat her opponent with this continuous barrage, delicate fragrance Fujimi would be disappointed, so she did not react to her barrage being cancelled out. However, when she saw the situation at the center of the bright light that had just surged, a trace of surprise appeared in delicate fragrance Feng Jian's eyes. That is, she saw that in the center of the bright light that gradually turned into starlight and dissipated in the air, a figure was suspended in the air. The waist-length golden hair was still dazzling, and the purple eyes were as crystal clear as ever. Such a figure compared to just now had changed a lot. Because an extremely strange thing appeared on the figure's body. It was a garment that looked like a windbreaker and a knight's suit. The hem was long enough to reach the ankles and the entire body was pitch black. The wrist portion was covered with an armor-like object that extended to the back of the owner's hand. On the back of the hand, there were 2 sparkling and translucent oval-shaped gemstones that were embellished there, flashing with a dazzling arc of light. Of course, such an additional garment couldn't be considered a strange thing at all. The reason why this luxurious garment that looked like a windbreaker and a knight's suit was called a strange thing was that this garment was slowly rolling like a liquid, like a burning flame. It looked extremely magical. Wu Yan lowered his head and stretched out his hand in front of himself. He looked at the 2 crystal-clear oval-shaped gems and the knight's suit that was burning like a flame on the back of his hand. He curled the corner of his mouth and clenched his fist fiercely. Is this my Holy Knight's suit? Once upon a time in the world of star-carved Dragon Knight, Wu Yan received a revelation about the Holy Knight's suit that could increase the owner's strength. He spent a total of 1 million equipment points, item points, ability points, and summoning points to ask the system to forge him a piece of equipment that could increase his strength in all aspects. The equipment's grade was as high as A. It was a genuine legendary armament. This legendary armament that could increase the user's strength in all aspects was none other than this knight's uniform that was burning like a flame. The armor extended from the wrist to the back of the hand, and the back of the hand was adorned with sparkling and translucent oval-shaped gems. Because of the revelation he received from the Holy Knight's suit, Wu Yan decided to forge this legendary armament for a living. Therefore he named it the Holy Knight's suit. With this legendary armament, Wu Yan's abilities in all aspects would be greatly enhanced. Strength, defense, speed. Even Wu Yan's superpowers, magical power, magic and magic would be improved in all aspects. If Wu Yan was a little weaker than Delicate Fragrance just now, but with the Holy Knight's suit, it would be different. Feeling the improvement in all aspects in his body, Wu Yan once again clenched his fist, looked up, and looked at Delicate Fragrance, who was looking at him in surprise. The corner of his mouth lifted into a smile. Boom. In the next moment, as if something exploded under Delicate Fragrance's gaze, Wu Yan's body suddenly burst out a circle of violent air waves that spread out from his body and blew in all directions. That's magical power. After obtaining the Holy Knight's suit, it was already invincible. It belonged to Wu Yan's magical power. The magnitude of the demonic power was already comparable to Fengjin Yuxiang's boundless demonic power, causing Fengjin Yuxiang's somewhat surprised expression to instantly freeze. Wu Yan ignored Yuka's reaction. He raised his hand and a ball of pure white flame slowly rose into the air. It didn't look like it had any temperature at all. It burned peacefully. However, it was this seemingly inconspicuous white flame that made Delicate Fragrance feel a sense of crisis. You should be very happy just now, right? Wu Yan cast his gaze on Delicate Fragrance and grinned. Now it's my turn to fight back. After saying that, Wu Yan flicked his finger. The pure white flame that was only the size of a human head and didn't even have any temperature burst out like a comet, shooting toward Delicate Fragrance with a long fiery tail. As the pure white flame burst out, Delicate Fragrance felt a sense of crisis in her heart. Intuition told Delicate Fragrance that she absolutely could not touch that pure white flame. Otherwise, even if she had the ability to defy the heavens, she would definitely have to pay a price. Chapter 1851. Whoosh. Watching the pure white flame turn into a comet and burst toward her, Delicate Fragrance Kaze's cold and delicate face revealed a dignified expression. But in addition to the dignified expression, there was another emotion. Joy. There was no doubt that Delicate Fragrance Kaze was the kind of person who would be happier when the opponent was stronger. Therefore, after noticing that Wu Yan's strength had increased a lot after equipping the night suit that was burning like flames, Delicate Fragrance Kaze's face was both dignified and joyful. Of course, joy was joy, but the pure white flame brought a sense of crisis to Delicate Fragrance Kaze. Delicate Fragrance Kaze wasn't a reckless person who only knew how to charge forward recklessly. So without saying a word, Delicate Fragrance Kaze retreated for the first time since this battle. Her figure turned into an afterimage and retreated at an extremely fast speed. Whoosh. Although Fengjin Yu retreated at an extremely fast speed, the pure white flame was even more ferocious. At the same time, the flame seemed to expand with the wind, suddenly expanding in size, and soon turned into a huge pure white fireball. Like a white sun, the pure white fireball suddenly flashed in the air, and its speed also increased sharply. Delicate Fragrance Kaze's expression changed slightly. In a moment, Delicate Fragrance Kaze, who was chasing after her, suddenly exploded in her narrowed pupils. Boom! The terrifying fire wave swept wildly from the place where the pure white sun exploded. Waves of wind and waves with terrifying temperature raged in the air, scattering nearly half of the sunflowers below. After the explosion of the pure white fire wave raged for a while, a rather embarrassed figure flew out from the other side of the fire wave. After tapping a few times in the air, he stopped. It entered Wu Yan's field of vision. Seeing this, even Wu Yan was amazed. She was directly attacked by the white dragon's flame, but she wasn't injured? Yes. Feng Jianyuxiang, who flew out of the pure white fire wave, looked extremely disheveled. The bright clothes on her body also had traces of scorch marks and damage. Delicate Fragrance Kaze's white skin was exposed to the air. But Delicate Fragrance Kaze's aura still didn't weaken at all. The expression on her face didn't show the slightest pain. Instead, her fighting spirit was awe-inspiring. How long has it been since I fell to this point? Delicate Fragrance Kaze glanced at the damaged and scorched clothes on her body. Her face was full of joy. You can make me so embarrassed, you're really strong. But Delicate Fragrance Kaze's hand slowly grasped the parasol handle. With a sudden pull, the black shadow formed by the parasol tore through the air. The strong wind blew away the surrounding pure white fire waves. The tip of the parasol tilted down, and a terrifying monster power emerged from Feng Jianyuxiang's body. The real battle begins now. Delicate Fragrance Kaze clenched the parasol handle and stomped her foot. Dense Fragrance Kaze's demonic power exploded under her foot. The turbulent force caused Delicate Fragrance Kaze to turn into a black shadow and shoot straight at Wu Yan. Whoosh! Listening to the wind-whistling sound of Yuka Fujiwara's shadow charging towards him, Wu Yan instantly raised his guard. He stared at the incoming shadow, and with a grasp of his hand, a nimble long sword appeared out of thin air and fell into his hand. It was the Nin Temple Shana. Grabbing the Nigata no Shana, he tensed up his body and waited in place. When the shadow is about to reach him, he raised the Nigata no Shana and chopped it down with all his might. Suddenly, the power of the realm covered the Nin Temple Shana, like a sharp blade. The light and heavy realm. The Nin Temple Shana was originally light and agile. Under the influence of the realm, the moment it slashed down, it was like a meteorite falling from the sky. Wherever it passed, sparks flew in the air and an ear-piercing screech erupted. At this moment, the Nin Temple Shana was at least as heavy as a real mountain. Delicate Fragrance Kaze's face was still indifferent in the face of the Nin Temple Shana. Her hand trembled slightly as she clenched the parasol and stabbed out. Feng Jianyuxiang had clearly only stabbed once. Yet a stretch of umbrella shadows continuously appeared in front of him like a curtain of rain. All of them solidly pierced the blade of an Idian Shana that was chopping down with the force of a mountain. Clang! After a shrill sound that could pierce one's eardrums, the umbrella shadow that contained a powerful force shattered the light and heavy realm's power on the Nidian Shana blade, and at the same time, it easily knocked away the Nidian Shana that came attacking. As expected of the strongest in the fantasy village, Delicate Fragrance Kaze's attack made Wu Yan's expression change slightly. He smiled bitterly in his heart. Again and again she used pure strength to disperse the power of the realm. Just how strong was this Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian's fighting ability? With this thought in mind, Wu Yan could only follow the force of the Nin Temple Shana that was pushed away. He rotated his body and carried the Nin Temple Shana with Delicate Fragrance Kaze's support. Borrowing the force of the Nin Temple Shana, he rotated on the spot with a tearing sound. Instantly, the Nin Temple Shana turned into a blade of light. With an oppressive sound, it ruthlessly slashed towards Delicate Fragrance Kaze from bottom to top. Come on. Delicate Fragrance Kaze also moved almost at the same time. She tightly held the parasol in her hand. Wisps of demonic power curled out of the parasol like mist, emitting a low vibrating sound. It surged up and heavily hit the Nin Temple Shana that was slashing towards her. Clang! The dull sound of steel colliding with steel resounded throughout the Eternal Night's quadruple barrier. Ha! Powerful demonic power fluctuated around her body and flowed through her palm to the parasol in her hand. Delicate Fragrance Kaze slightly bent her body and coldly shouted. The demonic power on the parasol in her hand suddenly condensed and then exploded. Bang! The parasol that hit the Nin Temple Shana exploded with a towering force. The sudden burst of force directly shook Wu Yan, who was holding the Nin Temple Shana, and sent him flying. Wu Yan gritted his teeth. He turned around and stabilized his body. He looked up and looked at Delicate Fragrance Kaze. Sure enough, it's impossible to win against this flower queen in terms of close combat ability. Delicate Fragrance Kaze didn't have any powerful abilities. Her combat ability was almost entirely focused on close combat. Wu Yan can't possibly win against Yuka Fujimi, who relied on close combat to become the strongest player in Fantasy Village. Since you're invincible in close combat, then I'll fight back with my ability. While speaking, Wu Yan raised one of his hands and the familiar pure white flames rose once again. However, although the white dragon's flames were powerful, they didn't hurt Delicate Fragrance Kaze. That was why Wu Yan raised his other hand. A burst of pitch-black electric light flashed amidst the crackling sound of electricity. Holding the pure white flames in his left hand and the pitch-black electric light in his right hand, Wu Yan stared at the powers of the white dragon and black dragon respectively. Then he actually brought the pure white flames and pitch-black electric light in the middle. Buzz. The moment the pure white flames and pitch-black electric light came into contact, wisps of white flames and black electric light burst out from the point of contact. The space was torn apart and distorted. Feng Jian Yuxiang's face became extremely solemn, and there was a slight change in her eyes. Feng Jian Yuxiang clearly felt that when the pure white flame came into contact with the pitch-black lightning, the demonic power in her body actually became sluggish. What exactly is that? How can it affect the operation of the demonic powers in my body? Delicate Fragrance Kaze couldn't get an answer to this question, at least not at this moment. Because in Wu Yan's hand, the pure white flames and pitch-black electric light were constantly twisting along with the surrounding space. As they squirmed slightly, they slowly gathered together. Not long after, a ball of golden electric light flickered on its surface and its color turned into a dazzling golden flame that floated before Wu Yan. Chapter 1852. The moment the resplendent golden flame with golden lightning flashing on its surface was born, an unusually wild and violent fluctuation suddenly rippled out in midair. The strange energy waves became even more violent. Strands of golden energy seeped out from the surrounding space. Finally, they all wrapped around Wu Yan, who is holding the resplendent golden flames as if he is holding a jewel. They spun around him like crazy. Following the rotation of these golden streams of air, a gust of wind suddenly emerged and swept out in all directions. The gust of wind was so strong that even some of the larger rocks on the ground were blown and rolled a few times on the ground, not to mention those fragile sunflowers. For the first time, Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian's heart showed an uncertain expression. What the hell is that? With Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian's accumulated experience, she could naturally distinguish some of the effects of the methods Wu Yan used before and after. In addition to the power that should belong to a certain monster sage that she had seen more than once, Delicate Fragrance Kaze could see that the white flame used by this man who called himself Yakumo Haku should be some kind of ability to attack time. It was precisely because she saw the true face of the white flame that Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian was able to react in time under the direct attack of the white flame. She used a huge amount of monster power to cover her body and let the flame burn away the existence of the monster power itself. She rushed out of the flame in one go. So, Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian's clothes were a little damaged, but she didn't suffer any substantial damage. As for the knight's clothes that burned like flames, it was even easier to recognize. It must be some kind of equipment that can increase the user's power. At the beginning, the scarlet light on the other party's body should be some kind of ability that can borrow the power of others and reproduce it on his own body. It had to be said that Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian didn't say anything on the surface, but she had already seen through everything. Whether it was the effect of the red jade mode, the flame of the white dragon's burning flame, or the enhancement of the Holy Knight's outfit, they were all seen through by Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian with her experience. But to be able to see to this extent, it was enough to prove that Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian was experienced and knowledgeable. However, Feng Jian Yuxiang couldn't see anything from the dazzling golden flames that were flickering with golden lightning. He didn't know what kind of power it had, nor did he know what kind of effect it would have. He didn't even know what kind of ability it was. How should I solve it? However, looking at the golden flame, Delicate Fragrance Feng Jian had a feeling that her palms were sweating, telling her it was definitely not just beautiful. Who? Feng Jian Yuxiang exhaled a long breath of air. She stared at the pale Wu Yan who was holding the bright golden flame. Feng Jian Yuxiang laughed out loud. That's right. That's how it should be. A violent demonic power surged out from Feng Jian Yuxiang's body, causing her to emit a dazzling light. She was like a sun, making people unable to look at her directly. In that case, I will also use my strongest attack to determine the winner with you. Who is the strongest in the fantasy village? Let us have a good fight. Amidst the laughter full of joy in the surrounding space, a burst of airflow like power fluctuations also seeped out, and rushed into the tall and slender body of Feng Jianyu. Under such circumstances, if there was an outsider present, they would be able to see that Wu Yan and Feng Jianyu seemed to be competing for something. Traces of unknown power fluctuations continuously emerged in the surrounding space, turning into air currents and wrapping around the two of them. However, the difference was that Wu Yan's bright golden flame had an effect on the surrounding space, causing the space to seem to have a chemical reaction and seep out its own power. Feng Jianyu, on the other hand, merged with nature through space, absorbing the power of nature and constantly improving her demonic power. Under such circumstances, the aura on Feng Jianyu's body became more and more terrifying until it reached a certain peak before stopping. Feeling the unprecedentedly powerful aura of Feng Jianyu, Wu Yan's eyes also flashed brightly, feeling the blood all over his body boiling at this moment. Although Wu Yan himself was not as powerful as Feng Jianyu, but since he was promoted to the 9th rank, Wu Yan had rarely encountered a battle where he needed to go all out. Now the strongest red jade mode had been used, and even the Holy Knight equipment that could increase his strength in all aspects was also used. At this moment Wu Yan had already brought out the strongest strength he could bring out. Coupled with the fact that he was fighting the strongest king of the fantasy village, the long-lost feeling of blood boiling made Wu Yan laugh out loud. It's not over yet. Amidst the laughter, Wu Yan's body once again surged with the power of the realm, and all of it flowed freely into the dazzling golden flames born from the fusion of the white dragon's flame and the black dragon's lightning. The realm of life and death. Life with a thought. Death with a thought. The power of the realm of life and death, that could change a person's life and death with a slight touch, was like a layer of light film, covering the dazzling golden flames flashing with golden lightning, making the strange fluctuations rising from the dazzling golden flames even more violent, faintly carrying the aura of death. Looking up and looking at Feng Jianyu, who was exuding a terrifying aura, Wu Yan was not the slightest bit timid. His body was as straight as a spear, looking extremely imposing. Since you took out the title of the strongest in the fantasy village, then I will accept it without hesitation. Let's see if you have the strength and qualifications. Feng Jianyu's beastkin power rose to the peak. In the end, it almost materialized and wrapped her entire delicate body. Only the pleasant laughter echoed. If you can do it, try it. The laughter suddenly stopped. At the same time, the beastkin power on Feng Jianyu's body suddenly began to converge. After a moment it actually flashed and split into a figure. Green, slightly curly short hair, wearing a red and dark red checkered vest and a knee-length skirt of the same color, a yellow bow tie in front, and a white long-sleeved shirt under the vest, holding a parasol in her hand. Another Feng Jianyu. That was Feng Jianyu's clone. Feng Jianyu had the ability to split into a clone that was completely no different from herself. This doppelganger had almost the same level of power as delicate fragrance Fengjian's main body. In other words, Wu Yan was now facing the two strongest existences in the fantasy village. Come on, let's fight. It was still the same sentence. The two Feng Jianyu raised the parasol in their hands at the same time, and all the beastkin power on their bodies surged to the tip of the parasol. With the infusion of such a huge amount of beastkin power at the tip of the two parasol, a liquid-like emerald green energy flowed like liquid. One move. Let's decide the winner. With a fierce shake of their hands, the two Feng Jianyu pointed the parasol in their hands at Wu Yan at the same time. Immediately, all the beastkin power on their body flowed along the parasol. Double spark. The beastkin power flowing on the tips of the two parasol burst out. Two overwhelming beams of light with a sharp and ear-piercing sound cut through the space like lightning and shot straight at Wu Yan in the distance. Wherever the beam of light passed, the space shattered inch by inch. Wu Yan's vision was completely covered by the bright light above the overwhelming beam of light. As the target of the beam of light, Wu Yan could clearly feel the terrifying power in the two huge beams of light. However, Wu Yan also had absolute confidence. The golden flames fused with the power of the two familiars, coupled with the power of his realm, any attack would dissipate in the face of this power. Taking a step forward, Wu Yan released one of his hands and raised the dazzling golden flames flickering with golden light above his head. His arm trembled as if he wanted to throw the golden flames in his hand out. Whoosh! Like a meteor, a golden ray of light shot out from Wu Yan's hand like a hot knife through butter. It shot out like a hot knife through butter. The moment the stream of light shot out, the surrounding space rippled like the surface of a lake with a huge rock thrown into it. It didn't take long for it to suddenly burst open, exploding into cracks more than 10 meters wide that spread along the trajectory of the stream of light. Chapter 1853. Swish. Amidst an extremely sharp sonic boom, the resplendent golden flames that had turned into streaks of light tore through the air like a meteor. Wherever they passed, the space collapsed into pitch-black cracks that were nearly a dozen meters long. The space in this area was completely shattered like glass, causing the area to be in a sorry state. Swish. The two huge pillars of light that descended from the sky emitted a strong light that seemed to occupy the entire sky. They also carried an extremely terrifying power and a sharp sonic boom that seemed to distort space. They were like meteorites that fell straight down. No matter if it was the golden stream of light or the dazzling light pillars, both contained terrifying attacks that were enough to shatter the space along the way and spread the cracks. Just the fluctuations that leaked out were enough to kill a ninth-stage powerhouse on the spot. Two extremely frightening attacks that caused even the sky to change color finally collided violently in the next instant. However, just as Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang tensed up and prepared for the upcoming victory and defeat, waiting for the earth-shattering explosion caused by the collision of the two attacks, there was strangely no sound in midair. Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang lifted their heads in astonishment and witnessed the collision of the two attacks. Then they witnessed this scene. In midair, the ratio was completely different. The two attacks of completely different colors didn't clash fiercely with each other at the moment of collision. Instead, they twisted together like two masses of water of different colors. The golden and green attacks had unknowingly twisted into a huge sphere. The two colors of gold and green swirled around each other in the sphere. The space around the sphere became extremely distorted. Vaguely, there were extremely subtle tearing sounds coming from the inside of the sphere. Wu Yan stared at the twisted sphere in midair. A sphere of two colors. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper and even his body was swaying. Xiao's magical fluctuations had weakened to an unprecedented level. If it weren't for the remaining magical fluctuations, perhaps even Wu Yan wouldn't be able to hover in midair. Apparently, it fused the white dragon's flames and the black dragon's lightning together. It formed the dazzling golden flames that carried golden electric arcs on the surface and even enhanced the realm of life and death. This attack. It had almost squeezed out all the magical powers in Wu Yan's body that had never been exhausted. Compared to Wu Yan, Feng Jianyuxiang's situation was slightly better. After all, she was the incarnation of nature. Although the clone magic cannon had almost exhausted the magical powers in Feng Jianyuxiang's body, nature was still providing her with a continuous supply of magical powers. At this moment, even if the magical powers that she recovered were insignificant, it was still much better than Wu Yan's. However, Feng Jianyuxiang's face was also pale. She couldn't even maintain her avatar and it collapsed directly. Feng Jianyuxiang's eyes were fixed on the distorted sphere in midair, and she didn't look away for a moment. Under the gaze of Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang, in midair, the sphere that was constantly twisting and faintly emitting a subtle tearing sound suddenly fluctuated violently like magma before a volcanic eruption, and it suddenly expanded. Looking at the sudden strange fluctuations and the huge distorted sphere that expanded, Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang both felt an uneasiness for no reason, making their hearts sink. In the end, the degree of distortion of the expanding sphere became more and more intense. The surrounding space also seemed to be suppressed by something and there was a kacha-kacha sound. Not long after, the expanding distorted sphere suddenly burst into a dazzling light, but all the sounds strangely stopped. Even the space suddenly stabilized and no longer produced any abnormalities. It wasn't until this moment that a warning sign rose in Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang's hearts as if they sensed something. Their expressions changed abruptly, and they disregarded the consumption of a large amount of magical power and demonic power in their bodies and retreated frantically. The moment Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang retreated, the distorted sphere that was blooming with a strong light suddenly burst like a punctured balloon. Boom! Along with an earth-shattering explosion, A dazzling light sprinkled from the sky. The distorted sphere seemed to have reached a certain critical point and finally couldn't bear it anymore. It exploded in midair along with an extremely terrifying shockwave. Wherever the shockwaves passed, the space trembled, and in less than half a second, like glass, it shattered piece by piece. Boom. Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang, who were retreating, had just retreated for a distance when the terrifying shockwave caught up with them at lightning speed. Like a truck, it slammed into Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang fiercely. PFFF. Under the terrifying impact, a mouthful of crimson blood spurted out from Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang's mouths at the same time. Immediately, both of them were sent flying like garbage, directly smashing into the barrier of the eternal night fourfold barrier that shrouded the entire sunflower field. Boom. The eternal night fourfold barrier was smashed into pieces by Wu Yan and Feng Jianyuxiang, who were sent flying backward. The rest of the barrier also collapsed and disappeared completely from the impact of the shockwave. But the aftermath of the impact continued to spread to the surroundings. The sunflower field was originally relatively close to the Boli Great Barrier of Fantasy Town. With the shockwave still raging, it wouldn't take long for the Boli Great Barrier to suffer the same impact. At that time, it would inevitably shatter directly like the eternal night fourfold barrier. At that time, without the most important Boli Great Barrier, Fantasy Town would not be able to escape the fate of destruction. Buzz. At the critical moment in the sky, a pitch-black crack full of ferocious eyeballs suddenly split open amidst the tremors of space. A tall figure emerged from it and flashed into the sky. The realm of movement and stillness. As such a voice echoed in midair, an unusually huge force burst out from the tall figure in midair and shrouded it. It actually froze the shockwave that was rolling out like a stormy sea. Of course, it was definitely not enough to just freeze it. The realm of being and nothingness. At the next moment, the same voice, but with a different content, reverberated in the air once again. A force that was more than a little stronger than before once again enveloped this world, emanating circles of ripples that contained a strange power. Under the ripples, all the frozen waves that were touched by the ripples slowly disappeared from this world as if they had never appeared before. About 10 seconds later, the raging shockwaves in this area completely disappeared, leaving behind a silent scene. It was as if nothing had happened, which made people's hearts beat faster. After the shockwaves were completely wiped out, the tall figure in midair landed and stood on the ground. She had blonde hair, purple eyes, and wore a pinkish-white princess dress that was similar to a Daoist robe. She also wore a pinkish-white flower bud hat on her head and held a parasol in her hand. Who else could it be apart from purple? Yukari gently waved her hand, and a gentle force flew out and disappeared in 2 different directions. Then it carried 2 people who were in a sorry state and had traces of blood on their bodies back to Yukari. Purple didn't look at Tensei Fujimi, but directly looked at Wu Yan. She looked at Wu Yan, who had completely fallen into a state of unconsciousness, and smiled bitterly. It's just a drop of blood. If you want to get it, there are many ways. Why do you have to make yourself like this? Although she said so, Purple knew that it was entirely because she didn't return to Wu Yan's side and had been hiding in the dark to spy on Wu Yan. That was why Wu Yan used the simplest and most violent method to obtain a drop of blood from Tensei Fujimi. It was her fault. Purple crouched down and pressed her hand on Wu Yan's body. After a while, she let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, although the injury is serious, with Xiao Yan's recovery ability, he should be able to recover soon. Chapter 1854. Originally, the Paladin outfit was based on the Paladin armor. After the Paladin armor was strengthened and modified, it became a piece of equipment that could increase the user's abilities in all aspects. The Paladin armor was nothing more than an amalgamation of mana. It was similar to vassal beasts, which were also amalgamations of mana. Naturally, the Paladin outfit was also a piece of equipment made of pure mana. The only difference was that the vassal beast's consciousness was lodged in the user's blood. The user only needed to provide mana for the vassal beasts to manifest their own forms and abilities. On the other hand, the Paladin armor was based on the design. The user had to ask the dragon who created the Paladin armor to create the Paladin armor according to the design. Only then would the Paladin armor be able to display its proper form and abilities. The same went for the Paladin outfit. Although Wu Yan had exchanged for the A-rank legendary armament, to be more precise, he had only exchanged for the blueprint of the paladin outfit. Based on Wu Yan's physical attributes and abilities, the system created the most suitable paladin outfit for Wu Yan. Then it provided the blueprint to Wu Yan. Therefore Wu Yan only needed to construct the paladin outfit according to the blueprint, just like the holy dragons in the star-engraved Dragon Knight world. Then the paladin outfit would appear and be equipped on his body. That was why Wu Yan could easily summon the paladin outfit during battle with just a thought. Naturally, when Wu Yan's mana was completely depleted or he lost consciousness, the paladin outfit would disappear. The Red Jade mode was similar. Although there was still some time left, the Red Jade mode was still a bloodline ability. As long as Wu Yan lost consciousness, the Red Jade mode could no longer be maintained. When the Red Jade mode and the Holy Knight outfit disappeared, Wu Yan's aura weakened all the way until he dropped out of the demigod rank. He could feel the bloodstains on his body. With his eyes closed, Wu Yan's aura continued to weaken. Purple also let out a sigh. She stroked Wu Yan's cheek and her tone became unusually gentle. You've already tried your best. He had indeed worked very hard. To be able to fight against Yuka Kazumi, the strongest person in Fantasy Town, who even Yuka Kazumi couldn't defeat in the past. Even if it was because of the Red Jade mode and the Holy Knight equipment, Wu Yan could still be proud. After saying this, Z stood up, raised his head and looked at the surroundings. The first thing that caught his eye was the place that had turned into a terrible mess. It used to be a field of golden sunflowers or a field of sunflowers that stretched as far as the eye could see. Now the sunflowers' golden color and the grassland's green color had all disappeared. Only the dark gray and brown soil remained. As if a typhoon had passed through, the scene became chaotic and battered. The sunflowers and grassland had long since disappeared in this battle. The ground was also razed to the ground, showing the darkest color. There were even potholes everywhere filled with rolling stones. It was abnormally desolate. Not only that, but in the surrounding space, pitch-black spatial rifts could be seen everywhere. Some of them even shattered into black holes. Some of them were like broken glass, still falling pieces. The endless darkness in the spatial rifts sent chills down one's spine. One could imagine what would happen if an ordinary person or a weak existence accidentally touched these spatial rifts. This should be the most serious destruction in Fantasy Town, right? Purple rubbed his forehead as if he had a headache. This is really worrisome. If Purple didn't rush over in time and stop the spread, Fantasy Town would have suffered more damage than this. That's why I hate brainless battles. A voice suddenly interrupted Violet's contemplation. You're right. You're right. Violet sighed. Cough, cough. After hearing this painful cough, Purple came back to his senses. The corner of his mouth was overflowing with a mocking smile. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the cough. There Youxiang Fujian covered his chest with one hand and supported himself with the other, using a parasol to support himself on the ground. Although his face is abnormally pale, his body is swaying and his clothes are covered in blood, Youxiang Fujian still insisted on standing up. He didn't allow himself to lie weakly on the ground and coughed. Wu Yan has already lost consciousness under the impact of the storm, but Youxiang Fujian is still conscious and still has the strength to stand up. From this, it can be seen how strong Youxiang Fujian is. It's a pity that even though she didn't lose her consciousness, she doesn't have the same immortality as Wu Yan. As the strongest of the monsters and the embodiment of nature, even if she has a strong regenerative ability, it seems like she won't be able to recover from her injuries in a short period of time. Looking at Youxiang Fujian standing up with a pale face and covering his chest with a paper fan, Purple took out his paper fan and covered the lower half of his face, but there is a hint of ridicule in his tone. Era, I don't think I've ever seen you in such a sorry state. In the past, Fengjian Yuxiang and Purple also had a battle. In that battle, because she was worried about the safety of the fantasy village, Yukari did not use her full strength. As a result, she was pursued by Delicate Fragrance, who used all of her strength without any scruples. It could be said that she was in an extremely sorry state. Now that the tables have turned, it's only natural for Yukari to ridicule Wu Yan after seeing Yukari in such a pitiful state during the fight. Youxiang Fujian seems to have guessed that Purple will have this reaction. He covered his chest and didn't even look at Purple. He cast his gaze on Wu Yan, who fell into a coma. After a long time he showed a somewhat empty smile. Looks like I've won. That's right. Wu Yan has lost consciousness, which is equivalent to losing the ability to fight. Although the injuries on his body are recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye, he can't continue to fight. On the other hand, Youxiang Fujian, even if his body is injured enough to kill an ordinary human or demon a dozen times, his recovery ability is not as good as Wu Yan's. But with the support of nature, he has recovered some of his demon power. Maybe he can't do anything in close combat, but he can still use 1 or 2 magic cannon attacks. In other words, Youxiang Fujian did win this battle. That's true. Purple also calmly admitted this statement, but his eyes have been staring at Youxiang Fujian. But why do I feel that you don't seem very happy? I just can't accept this kind of victory. Youxiang Fujian moved his body that is full of pain and said indifferently. If he didn't faint, the loser would probably be me, and I still have the ability to fight, so it's not a clear winner. If he didn't faint? The loser would probably be you? Still have the ability to fight. Purple looked at Youxiang Fujian meaningfully. What a surprise. You would actually use hypotheses such as if, and probably, to justify yourself after a battle. It seems like you don't want to admit the result of this battle. This is indeed a very surprising thing. For Youxiang Fujian, a battle is a battle, the process of a battle is ever-changing, anything can happen, so he definitely won't use if to evaluate a battle after the battle. After all, there is no if in a battle, the result is everything. Youxiang Fujian did win this battle, there is no doubt about this. There is no if to say. Because Wu Yan did lose consciousness, he can't continue to fight. Youxiang Fujian was very clear about this result. He frowned at himself for using if to deny this result, but after a while he put on a chuckle. Maybe I'm looking forward to another battle with him. Leaving this sentence, Feng Jian Yuxiang propped up her body and opened her parasol. She turned around and slowly walked away. Today's weather is good, the flowers should grow well, right? Looking at the back of Feng Jian Yuxiang, who was gradually walking away, Violet was silent for a long time. Then she helplessly sighed. I'm really not good at dealing with her. Chapter 1855. His consciousness was as chaotic as chaos. His body was as heavy as iron and lead. His strength was flowing away like water. His voice was as muddy as hoarse. That was what Wu Yan was feeling at this moment. He felt as if he was drowning in an endless sea of despair that he could not see the end of. His body was struggling, but there was no strength everywhere. There was no way to support himself. His hands and feet were paddling, but he still felt like he was sinking, as if he had fallen into hell. In this unconscious state where even breathing became difficult, Wu Yan could only endure the feeling of emptiness in his body and drift around with his chaotic consciousness. All of this was because of the exhaustion of his magic power and the serious blow to his body, which brought about such an uncomfortable feeling. It's obvious that the injuries he suffered before he fainted, even if he recovered in a short period of time, the pain of that moment still made him feel very uncomfortable as he fainted while carrying the pain with him. Fortunately, the pain came and went quickly. After a long time, Wu Yan felt that his chaotic consciousness finally showed signs of condensing. His body gradually became able to exert strength, and the dark sea of drowning began to become bright. As if awakened, Wu Yan slowly opened his eyes, exposing a pair of somewhat slack burgundy pupils to the air. After a while he could focus on the scene in front of him. The ceiling. Should be a wooden roof. Moreover, it was the same roof as the Japanese-style tatami room of Kagaya in Penglai Mountain. However, Wu Yan knew that the familiar roof in front of him was definitely not the roof of Kagaya's room in Penglai Mountain. The reason was very simple. Although there were computers and game consoles in Kagaya's room in Penglai Mountain, there were no modern fluorescent lights or light bulbs. The roof in front of him. There was a bright fluorescent light, illuminating Wu Yan's vision. Where is this? This was the first question in Wu Yan's mind. Why am I here? This was the second question in Wu Yan's mind. What's wrong with me? This was the third question in Wu Yan's mind. Although it was the third question, this question was the first to be answered. Immediately after. The second question was also solved after Wu Yan solved the third question. There was only one question left. Wu Yan had no way of answering the question by himself. That's right. Holding his head, Wu Yan smiled bitterly. I fainted during the battle with Yuka Fujimi. To be more precise, it should be said that in the battle with Delicate Fragrance. Wu Yan used all of his strength in this attack, And then in order to avoid the aftermath of the collision with Delicate Fragrance's attack, he did his best to retreat. Then there was no then. Wu Yan only remembered that in the process of retreating he was still swept by the aftermath of the impact. Immediately after, his body was in pain and he completely lost consciousness. Wu Yan himself didn't know what happened after that, but looking at the roof in front of him he could guess what happened even if he had to guess. Someone must have arrived at the scene, found him unconscious and brought him here. As a result, the second and third questions were answered. As for the first question, Wu Yan had no spare energy to think about it. There was only one thought left in his mind. I fainted. Then in the battle between him and Delicate Fragrance, who won in the end? If Delicate Fragrance also fainted, then it was a draw. But if Delicate Fragrance still had a breath and could hold on, then there was no doubt that he had fainted and lost the ability to fight. Of the two possibilities, Wu Yan was more inclined to the second one. There was no other reason. It was just that Delicate Fragrance's strength had left a deep impression in Wu Yan's mind, so Wu Yan couldn't imagine Delicate Fragrance's appearance of being seriously injured and unconscious. Wu Yan felt that with Yuka Kazumi's strong and stubborn personality, she would most likely hold on until the very end and leave, right? This guess wasn't completely correct, but it was pretty much the case. That's why Wu Yan had such a bitter smile on his face. I didn't think I would lose in a battle with my full strength after such a long time. Wu Yan gave it his all in this battle. Not only did he use his most powerful Red Jade mode, he even equipped his paladin outfit and used his familiar's abilities. Could be said that he was truly going all out with his trump cards. Although he still had a lot of tricks and abilities that he hadn't used yet, they were nothing compared to trump cards like the Red Jade mode, the Holy Knight outfit and familiars. It would only be embarrassing if he used them against Yuka Fujimi. As for summoning his familiars directly, that's even more ridiculous. Of course, if the host's strength increased, so would the familiars residing in the host's blood. But that was only if the host's strength increased. Wu Yan used the ruby mode to reach demigod rank. It wasn't Wu Yan's own strength, it was the result of an ability. Under such circumstances, the familiar's strength wouldn't increase. Therefore, when Wu Yan entered Violet's ruby mode and reached demigod rank, the familiar's strength remained at peak rank 9 Wu Yan's level. Even if they were boosted by the paladin equipment, they would barely reach demigod rank. How could a demigod rank familiar be used against Delicate Fragrance, who was already level 97 and only needed 1 or 2 more levels to reach peak demigod rank? That would be a disgrace. Plus, it would be foolish to let outsiders interfere in a fight of this level. It would cause a lot of uncertainties in the battle. Wu Yan rejected Natsuki, Nagisa and Kanon's suggestion to fight Yukari Kazumi more than once. He only used White Dragon and Black Dragon's abilities to deal with Yukari Kazumi. Not only did Wu Yan have helpers, Delicate Fragrance had helpers as well. They were much stronger than Wu Yan. After all, Delicate Fragrance could create a clone that was on par with the main body. At that time, Natsuki, Nagisa, Kanon, White Dragon and Black Dragon would gang up on Yukari Fujimi. Yukari Fujimi would definitely be tortured to death by Yukari Fujimi, who would become a peak demigod after 1 or 2 levels. Therefore, no matter how one looked at it, Wu Yan had lost the battle. This fact made Wu Yan realize that he wasn't strong at all. Indeed, after ascending to Tier 9, Wu Yan didn't go all out in a fight other than this one. He didn't even use his peak Tier 9 strength under normal circumstances. However, that wasn't because Wu Yan was too strong. It was because there were too few true powerhouses, and Wu Yan hadn't encountered one yet. His fight with Fujimi Yuka made him realize that he's not weak but he's not strong either. Compared to the real strong, the demigod tier existences, he's still a far cry from them. Of course, this was also because Wu Yan had been doing the demigod path mission. If Wu Yan had turned in the demigod path mission and generated a tool for reaching demigod rank, the result would have been different. However, Wu Yan's ambition was too great. He didn't want to be an ordinary demigod powerhouse, he wanted to be a peak demigod powerhouse. Thinking up to this point, Wu Yan couldn't help but raise one of his hands in front of his own face and clench his fist. Looks like I have to hurry up with the demigod path mission. Swoosh. At this time a sound came from the side. Not far away from Wu Yan, a Japanese-style paper door was suddenly pulled open. A petite figure struggled to carry a basin and a towel as she tiptoed in. It was a little girl. She had cute cat ears and brown shoulder-length hair. She wore a green hat and a golden earring on her left ear. She wore a red one-piece jacket with golden edges and white sleeves. She also had two brownish-black tails on her back. The tips of the tails were white. Meow meow meow. The cat-eared little girl seemed to have noticed Wu Yan, who had woken up. She was stunned for a moment, then let out a series of cat meows. She ran out at an extremely fast speed, shouting non-stop. Lord Lon. Lord Purple's strange fiancé has woken up, meow. Hearing this, Wu Yan couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Forget about the fiancé Sama, he also knows who the person who popped out of nowhere is. But what's with that strange thing? Did he look strange? Chapter 1856. This was a small wooden house at the edge of the realm. The wooden house was the same as the Forever Pavilion in the Lost Bamboo Forest. It was the kind of ancient Japanese-style house. The scale was not very large. It could only be regarded as a little bigger than the buildings of ordinary people. From the outside, this small wooden house, excluding the living room, kitchen and other places, could probably only accommodate 4 or 5 people. Of course, this was the result of considering that each person had a room. The difference between the house and the Forever Pavilion was that even though the Forever Pavilion looked very old, the whole body was brand new, as if it had not been destroyed by the years. This small wooden house at the edge of the realm did not have such a feeling, but no matter who it was, no one would think that it was a very ordinary house. This was because an ordinary house would definitely not be surrounded by countless dark spaces. Moreover, in this boundless dark space, there were many ferocious eyeballs. In such a small wooden house in a Japanese-style tatami room, Wu Yan sat on a bed directly on the ground. In front of him was a tray with a few dishes and a bowl of white rice. He was like a patient being taken care of. As a matter of fact, Wu Yan is very hungry. Even if the dishes in front of him are very simple, he has the urge to gobble them all down. However, Wu Yan did not touch the dishes in front of him for a long time. There was still a calm expression on his face. The reason was very simple. It was just that there were two very strong eyes that had been staying on Wu Yan, which made Wu Yan a little uncomfortable. Looking carefully on the side of the bed, a figure was staying there, staring at Wu Yan, who was sitting on the bed. It was a very tall young girl, not inferior to Yui Fujimi Yoxiang and Yonglin Yagi. The girl had a pair of fox-like ears on her head and 9 huge tails behind her. Each tail was more than 1.5 meters long. The hair on it was extremely soft and smooth, and it had a golden luster, and the end was white. At first glance, it was obvious that it was a fox's tail. The girl who had fox ears and a tail was also wearing clothes that were similar to Violet's. The front part of her body was like a Daoist robe and a princess dress. However, the front part of the girl's body was not purple but blue. The princess dress was also not pink and white. It was pure white, and the sleeves were very wide. The girl tucked her hands into her sleeves and sat cross-legged on the ground in a very standard posture. She wore a white hat on her head, and she had short blonde hair that reached her shoulders. Her golden eyes were fixed on Wu Yan. She kept sizing him up as if she's trying to figure out something. Her eyes were filled with a sense of scrutiny. Beside the girl, the cat-eared lowly copied her and sat cross-legged on the ground. However, her body twitched from time to time. It's obvious that she's not a well-behaved person. She didn't look at Wu Yan with judgmental eyes, instead she looked at him with curiosity. Being stared at with such intense gazes by these two girls, one big and one small, who can be said to be exceptionally beautiful and cute, no matter how thick-skinned he is, he would still feel uncomfortable. So Wu Yan could only scratch his cheek and say helplessly, "Could it be that there's really something strange about my body?" Until Wu Yan spoke, the big and small girl withdrew their gaze. First they looked at each other, and then the big fox-like girl spoke cautiously. "No, you misunderstood. This one does not have that kind of impolite idea." At first glance, the fox-like girl's words seemed to be very polite and respectful. But Wu Yan could hear that this fox-like girl was hesitating. She was hesitating whether she should treat him with such respect. Sigh. Wu Yan sighed slightly. "All right, if you have anything to say or ask, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. It's tiring for me to guess." "That's right. You're right." "Is that so?" The young girl nodded her head in agreement and finally asked such a question. "That, are you really Lady Z's fiancé?" Once the sentence was said, the cat-eared little lowly leaned closer and looked at Wu Yan with even more curiosity. Obviously, this is the reason why the two girls have been observing Wu Yan all this while. Wu Yan shook his head as he chuckled. He picked up the bowl on the tray in front of him and started eating in small bites. He waited until the fox-like girl and the cat-eared lowly started to get impatient before he opened his mouth to speak. "Aren't you going to introduce yourself first?" Hearing this, the two girls were slightly taken aback. The fox-like girl hesitated for a moment before replying. "I am Yakumo, Lady Z's Shikigami." Shikigami. They were gods, monsters, or spirits that served their masters. The fox-like young girl in front of him was actually a nine-tailed demon fox. She was a demonic beast under Yukari's command and was a spirit-branded retainer. As for the name Yakumo, it was given to her personally by Yukari after she became Yukari's Shikigami. Yukari didn't know her real name, but from the fact that Yukari gave her the surname Yakumo, it was obvious that this Shikigami wasn't as harmless as she looked. "Meow. Orange's name is Orange Meow." The cat-eared little lowly replied to Wu Yan with a cheerful voice. "Orange is Lady Z's Shikigami Meow." In other words, the cat-eared little girl in front of him was Yakumo's Shikigami. In other words, she was Lady Z's Shikigami and a member of Yakumo's family. However, Orange didn't have the surname Yakumo. This proved that while Orange was a Shikigami, her strength wasn't outstanding enough for Lady Z to give her the surname Yakumo. The two Shikigami in front of him were members of Yakumo's family. And this small wooden house at the edge of the realm was Yakumo's house. It was Lady Z's real residence. After knowing that this was Yakumo's house, Wu Yan guessed that Lady Z had rushed over after his battle with Yuka Fujimi and brought him here. However, Wu Yan didn't expect Blue and Orange to mention the matter of her fiancé. It wasn't hard to imagine. Although Violet was usually not very dignified, lazy, and had no moral integrity, her super strength and demon-like wisdom were indeed frightening. As Lady Z's Shikigami and Shikigami's Shikigami, Blue and Orange respected Lady Z from the bottom of their hearts. Now someone suddenly came out and said that he was the fiancé of their most respected master and master's master. It was no wonder Blue and Orange looked at Wu Yan with such a strange gaze. Wu Yan secretly shook his head at this, but on the surface he smiled at Blue and Orange. Did Lady Z deny this matter? Blue and Orange were speechless. Wu Yan. Needless to say, Lady Z didn't deny this matter, at least not in front of Blue and Orange. "I understand how you feel." Wu Yan sighed. "But, believe me, my relationship with Lady Z is more complicated than you think. It's much more important and meaningful than the relationship of a fiancé and wife. Isn't that right? Even their lives were intertwined and they couldn't leave each other. This relationship was much closer and more meaningful than the relationship of a fiancé and wife." Allah. Almost as soon as Wu Yan finished speaking, a familiar voice echoed from outside the door and traveled into everyone's ears. "To hear you say that, Xiaoyan, it's not a waste for me to travel so far to bring you back." Hearing this voice, Wu Yan, Blue and Orange turned their heads at the same time. They saw Lady Z standing there with a paper fan covering her mouth. She was looking at Wu Yan with ridicule and joy in her eyes. "I almost forgot. Little Yen is now called Yakumo Bai. That's a good name. Why don't we call you Yakumo from now on?" Lady Z. Blue and Orange were shocked. What is Lady Z doing? Is she admitting that this man has the right to use Yakumo's surname? However, Wu Yan didn't care about Blue and Orange's shock at all. He shrugged as if he didn't appreciate the gesture. "Forget it. It sounds like I'm marrying into her family. It's fine as an alias." Blue and Orange were stunned. "Alias? Yakumo's surname can only be used as an alias?" Moreover, looking at Lord Z's nonchalant manner, he did not seem to care about this at all. "Who is this man in front of me?" Chapter 1857. For Blue and Orange, who respected Violet from the bottom of their hearts, the surname Yagyun was an honor. For this reason, Blue was proud of having the surname Yagyun. Orange had also been working hard to obtain the surname Yagyun. Now that someone had used such an honorable surname as an alias, one could imagine how complicated Blue's heart was. As for Orange, it was pure admiration. She looked at Wu Yan with sparkling eyes. Meow, using Yagyun's surname as an alias. Strange Lord Fiancé is really amazing, Meow. Hearing this, Wu Yan was speechless. To him, Yagyun's surname was indeed special, but it wasn't to the extent of being honorable. If it was, it would be good. If it wasn't, it would just be a pity. It was a good choice to use it as an alias. After all, Wu Yan needed to enter and exit various dungeon worlds. Sometimes it was necessary to hide one's identity. Wu Yan never imagined that using Yagyun's surname as an alias would cause him to be worshipped. Moreover, why was it strange Lord Fiancé again? Those who didn't know would think that he was Orange's fiancé. On the other hand, Blue couldn't quite let it go. Lord Violet, this is Lord White. Is he really your fiancé? All this time Blue had been by Violet's side. It was more accurate to say that Blue had always been by Violet's side. Basically, other than when Violet was sleeping or when Violet ordered Blue to do something, Blue had always been by Violet's side. Therefore, Blue believed that she knew Violet better than anyone else, including some of Violet's closest friends. However, some time ago, when Violet came out of her room as usual, Lon noticed that there was a sudden change in Violet. For example, in the past, Violet had always been sleeping during the day. She would definitely move around at night. She had to sleep for 12 hours every day. However, since a while ago Violet's schedule seemed to have changed a little. Sometimes she would even move around during the day and sleep at night. In addition, Violet had always been full of praise for Blue's cooking. But some time ago Violet would frown from time to time when she ate Blue's cooking, showing a slightly dissatisfied expression, and would even mutter such a sentence. Even though Blue's cooking is good, it's not as good as Little Yan's. Our appetite has been spoiled by Little Yan's cooking. It wasn't just these changes. Some of Purple's actions were also confusing Blue. For example, on the first day of the change, Violet suddenly made such a suggestion to Blue. It's been a long time since I've been to Fantasy Village. Why don't we take a stroll around Fantasy Village? Then Purple, who had always been lazy to the point that she even threw the job of maintaining the great boundless barrier to Blue, strolled through the entire fantasy town as if she was homesick. Another example was Yukari, who used to use her gap ability to peek at all kinds of people, things in Fantasy Village. Recently, whenever she opened her gap to peek, she would secretly mutter such a sentence. Eye of Little Yan's. Then Violet, who always liked to peep but would never target a specific person. Her peeping range was very wide, but recently she had been using her gap ability to observe a person, and it was a strange man that Blue had never seen or known before. If that was all, it would be fine. Blue naturally knew how monstrous Violet's IQ was. It wasn't surprising that Violet would do some unfathomable things that she couldn't understand. However, what Lon couldn't accept the most was that the Lord Z, whom he respected the most in his heart, had recently been speaking such words in his sleep with a flushed and seductive face in his dreams. Little Yen. No. Lon clearly remembered how flustered she was when she accidentally overheard Violet's sleep talk. There were countless times when Lon wanted to scream out loud like a maniac. Who is this Little Yen? Unfortunately, Blue didn't get the answer even once. Every time she asked Violet about it, Violet would look at her meaningfully and smile perfunctorily. It wasn't until a while later that Blue finally found out. It turned out that the strange man that Yukari had been observing through the gaps was none other than the rumored Xiao Yan. What was even more shocking was that this mysterious Little Yen called himself Yakumo Bai. He even said that he was Yakumo Z's fiancé, the head of House Yakumo. Lon expressed that her brain really wasn't enough recently. Blue could confirm 100 times, 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times. Violet had never interacted with such a man. She didn't even have the chance to meet him, greet him, or even walk past him. At least that was what Blue knew. Aside from sleeping, Violet would always have Blue by her side. If she really knew someone of the opposite sex, there was no way Blue wouldn't know. However, this time, Blue's understanding of the world was completely overturned. Two people who didn't know each other at all. Was it possible that one of them would call out the other's name every time they opened their mouths and even dream about it in their dreams, while the other would casually mention the setting of fiancé? The answer was of course no. Thus, Blue couldn't help but admit that she had failed in her duty. Unbeknownst to him, in a place he didn't know, or even in a situation where he didn't know anything, his Lord Z had developed such a deep friendship with a stranger of the opposite sex that even he had no choice but to admit defeat. Or rather, feelings. How could she tolerate this? Indigo could clearly tell that this was absolutely intolerable. Therefore, even though she had asked this question countless times, Violet had always brushed it off without admitting or denying it. Blue felt that she had to clarify this matter. Of course, the most important thing was that she had watched Violet secretly observe a stranger of the opposite sex every day. Hearing Violet mutter the name of a stranger of the opposite sex every day, Blue felt a sour feeling in her heart. Since Lady Z was acquainted with such a person, why didn't she let Blue know? Why did she keep Blue in the dark all this time? Could it be that Lady Z was starting to distrust her? Violet and even Wu Yan clearly sensed her thoughts. The two of them looked at each other and laughed bitterly at the same time. Looking at how well Wu Yan and Yukari are working together, the sour feeling in Blue's heart became even more obvious. Lady Z, please answer my question. Violet looked at Azura with a faint smile. But didn't Xiao Yan already answer your question? Huh. Blue froze on the spot. It doesn't matter whether we are fiancé or not. Violet waved the paper fan in her hand and smiled gently. But just as Xiao Yan said, Xiao Yan and I have a much more important and meaningful relationship than a fiancé and fiancé. Hearing this, Blue finally took Violet's words seriously. Blue knew that Z had a habit of using the word we to refer to herself. Normally it would be teasing and frivolous. However, when Z used the word I to refer to herself, even though her tone and expression were casual and frivolous, the content was absolutely serious. As such, Blue could only admit with tears streaming down her face that her Lady Z had a special experience in a way that she didn't know anything about. Otherwise, Z, who had lived for such a long time but only had a few friends, none of whom were of the opposite sex, let alone someone who was closer to her than an engaged couple, would admit that there was someone who occupied an important position in her heart. After admitting it, Blue could only lower her head and bow to Wu Yan. My apologies, Lord Bai. Blue was rude earlier. Meow. Seeing her master lower her head, Orange didn't know what was going on, but she followed suit and lowered her head as well. My apologies, Meow. Well. Wu Yan scratched his cheek and waved his hand nonchalantly. Just don't cause any trouble, Wu Yan grumbled as he looked at Yukari. I have a lot of things to complain about, I know. Z smiled and changed the topic of conversation. I have something important to tell you as well. Let's go somewhere else and talk about it all at once. Without giving Wu Yan time to react, Yukari waved her hand and a gigantic crack opened up at the bottom of the room. Wu Yan, Yukari, Lan, and Qing were all sucked into the crack before they disappeared from the spot. The room returned to silence. Chapter 1858. His vision was distorted and the world was changing. Wu Yan felt his vision blur. When he regained his vision, the first thing he saw was a boundless sky. Under the sky there was a dazzling scene. A lively village. A lonely bamboo forest. A quiet mountain. A mysterious forest. The foggy lake, the bright red mansion, and the most eye-catching Bori shrine at the edge of the lake. They all formed a picture that was presented to Wu Yan without holding anything back. After a while, Wu Yan realized that he was in the sky above Gensokyo. He was sitting in a crack in the sky of Gensokyo. The inside of the crack is filled with malevolent eyeballs and darkness. Other than Wu Yan, Indigo and Orange were also present. They were also sitting in the crack. Their faces were filled with confusion. They had no idea why Yukari was here to talk. Wu Yan, Indigo and Orange looked to the side at the same time. They were shocked when they saw Yukari standing in the crack. They saw the mysterious and wise Yakumo Yukari, who had never lost her composure, looking down at Fantasy Village. Her eyes were filled with nostalgia, sadness and deep worry. Yes, worry. Yukari was looking at the Fantasy Village that she had spent her entire life protecting with worry. This expression. Forget about Wu Yan, even Blue, who has been with Yukari for who knows how long, has never seen this before. Thus Blue is the most shocked out of the three of them. She even started panicking. Lord Yukari. What's wrong? Violet did not care about Blue and Orange's panic. Instead, she let out a sigh as if she was trying to restrain her emotions. She took another deep breath and turned her head. She looked at Wu Yan, who was staring at her in shock. She asked such a question. What do you think of Fantasy Village? How about Fantasy Village? What kind of strange question was that? Although Wu Yan thought so, he knew that Violet would ask this question. She was definitely thinking about it. Plus, Z's performance just now. Wu Yan also became serious. It's an incredible place in every sense of the word. Wu Yan replied with a smile on his face. But it's beautiful, I like it too. Really? Violet lowered her head. She mumbled as if she was sleep-talking. Her next sentence made Wu Yan, Lan and Qing shudder. However, perhaps Fantasyland can't exist for too long. What? Blue and Orange cried out. Wu Yan also panicked for a moment, but when he saw Violet's worried look he calmed down. Although he didn't know why Z would say such a thing, if the fantasy village couldn't continue to exist, Z would definitely be the one who couldn't bear it. Fantasy village and the outside world were separated by two huge enchantments. One was the Great Boundless Barrier, and the other was the Realm of Illusion and Reality. Although the Great Boundless Barrier was the barrier that separated Fantasy Village from the outside world, the Realm of Illusion and Reality was more important to Fantasy Village. This was because the realms of illusion and reality separated the inner and outer realms, the realms of illusion and reality. Its function was to set the Fantasyland as an illusory world that did not exist physically, while the real world outside was set as a physical world, a world that truly existed. Just like the difference between a dream and reality, they existed at the same time, but the concept of existence was different. In such a case, those that didn't exist in reality, such as monsters and gods that only existed in humans' imagination, couldn't exist in the real world. They would be automatically attracted to the fantasy village and be taken in by the fantasy village. In other words, the monsters, gods, and other creatures that shouldn't exist in the outside world would disappear and come to live in Fantasy Village. This would strengthen the power of the monsters in Fantasy Village. The outside world would completely become the world of humans and Fantasy Village would be the world of monsters. However, because the outside world and the Fantasy Village were connected geographically, the Fantasy Village wasn't an independent world, but a world that was connected to the outside world like a mirage, and it didn't exist in the beginning. Theoretically speaking, the boundary between the realm of illusion and reality could be considered to be the existence that created the Fantasy Village. As for the realm of illusion and reality, it was a barrier that Violet had set up using her unique ability to control realms. As long as Z still existed, the Fantasy Village could be created and destroyed. Z's existence was an important condition for the establishment of the Fantasy Village. Therefore, even if Fantasy Village could no longer exist, Yukari could still set up a realm of illusion and reality, allowing Fantasy Village to be reborn again. Now that Violet had said such a thing, it meant that the fantasy land she had created was gradually heading towards destruction in a way that even Violet could not do anything about. Therefore, it was certain that Z was the most annoyed and helpless existence in the Fantasy Village. Since that's the case, as a man, Wu Yan can't show any signs of panic when Yukari is helpless for the first time ever. Otherwise, it would only make her more uneasy. With that in mind, Wu Yan forced himself to calm down and asked in a low voice, "What's going on?" Z seemed to have seen through Wu Yan's thoughts. She looked at Wu Yan with a funny and gentle gaze. After deliberating over her words, she said, "I think you should know that in the Fantasy Village, there will be a big change in the Great Barrier every 60 years, right?" Hearing this, Wu Yan's mind flashed with the memory of the Great Barrier's change that happened every 60 years. It was a change that happened every 60 years in the Fantasy Village. The cause was not caused by any monster in the Fantasy Village, but by the outside world. Once every 60 years, the number of ghosts in the real world would increase greatly, causing a phenomenon called the barrier's moderation, allowing a large number of ghosts from the outside world to enter the Fantasy Village. Because the Grim Reaper couldn't send these ghosts to the King of Hell to be judged, the ghosts who had nowhere to go could only rely on the flowers, causing all the flowers in the Fantasy Village to bloom at the same time regardless of the season. The Great Barrier's change wasn't man-made, it was similar to a natural phenomenon. After a certain period of time, the ghosts would be taken in by the underworld. At that time, the Fantasy Village would slowly return to its original state and the change would end. This so-called Great Barrier's change was the only one that didn't require the Great Barrier's help. It was a phenomenon that couldn't be stopped unless there were no more deaths in the outside world. In that case, there wouldn't be a ghost rampage that happened once every 60 years. Could it be related to the Great Barrier's change at this time? I'm the only one who knows about this. Even Ling Meng hasn't discovered it yet. Z smiled helplessly. As a matter of fact, every time the Great Barrier changes, the barrier moderation will weaken the Great Barrier to a certain extent. The Great Barrier's weakened. Azura exclaimed in surprise. But I've never seen the Great Barriers weakened before. Because Azura and Ling Meng were too lazy, the task of maintaining the Great Barrier was basically done by Azura. Therefore, Azura had the right to speak at this time. Usually you can't see it, but I found that every time the boundary moderation phenomenon occurs, The great boundary that is moderated will have some abnormalities, and the moderation time will be longer and longer. During the moderation process, the great boundary will become weaker and weaker. Purple shook her head. Do you know what this means? Other than Qing, who was still confused, Wu Yan and Azura thought of a possibility. Their expressions turned ugly. This means that as long as the boundary mitigation phenomenon continues, one day, the great boundary will not be able to withstand the weakening of the mitigation process and completely collapse. Yukari closed her eyes and revealed a cruel reality. According to my calculations, when the next Great Barrier's moderation occurs, the Great Barrier will be unable to withstand the moderation's weakening and collapse. There's only a year left until the next Great Barrier's moderation. Chapter 1859. The so-called Great Boundless Barrier was actually a barrier that separated common sense and extraordinary knowledge. Under the effect of the Great Bountiful Barrier, it would automatically distinguish the common sense and extraordinary knowledge of the outside world from the fantasy village. The common sense of the outside world was the extraordinary knowledge of the fantasy village, and the extraordinary knowledge of the outside world was the common sense of the fantasy village. This was not a physical barrier but a barrier that existed in an ethical sense. Moreover, the Bali Great Barrier was very powerful. Even monsters could not pass through it easily. Until now, other than Violet, who had the ability to enter realms and create gaps, as well as being the creator of Fantasy Village, no one had been able to freely enter and exit the outside world in Fantasy Village. At least, other than Violet, the other monsters, fairies, spirits, and even gods in Fantasy Village had never tried it. In other words, the Bali Great Barrier was the barrier that truly blocked the communication between the outside world and Fantasy Village, resulting in the formation of Fantasy Village. For example, if Fantasy Town was a house, then the Bali Great Barrier would be the wall of the house, isolating the inside of the house from the outside. The realm of illusion and reality, on the other hand, was a door that did not exist in this house. It was still very magical. It would automatically lead to the door of the house. The door was created by Violet, so as long as she was still around, no matter where she went, she would be able to create such a door, bring in the house, and turn Fantasy Village into a home. However, if the wall collapsed, it did not matter if Fantasy Village was a house or a home. It would be meaningless. If the house remained, it would only be an empty space where the house was originally located. Even if the house was still there, the house would still collapse along with the wall. At that time, even if the house was still there, the house would be gone. Therefore, the Bali Great Barrier as a wall was very important to Fantasy Village. The town of illusions did not have a boundary between illusion and reality. At most, it would not attract any foreign demons or humans. However, what would happen to the town of illusions if the Great Barrier of blooming beauty was no longer there? In the past, the Fantasy Village was not separated from the outside world by a barrier. It was called the border of the East Country. Because there were monsters living in the Fantasy Village, people who accidentally trespassed would be caught and eaten by the monsters. Therefore, people were afraid of this place. Ordinary people wouldn't go to Fantasy Village on purpose. However, there were also some people who lived in the Fantasy Village in order to fight against these monsters. As time passed, the number of humans had increased dramatically due to the development of civilization. Purple was worried that if the human population continued to grow, it would cause the balance of Fantasy Village to collapse. Therefore, she established the realm of illusion and reality to attract the monsters from the outside world to Fantasy Village, so the power of the monsters was balanced. Later on, modern civilization developed. It is somewhere between calling non-scientific things superstition and rejecting them. The monsters and the only humans in the Fantasy Village built a powerful barrier together, isolating the Fantasy Village from the outside world. They lived a quiet life here. Henceforth, the various things of the land of fantasy faded from the memory of man. This powerful barrier was known as the Great Boli Barrier. If the Boli Barrier were to disappear, Fantasy Paradise would once again be exposed to the eyes of humans and attract the prying eyes of humans. In the face of unknown superstitions, humans would generally treat them with fear and dread, including the gods that they believed in. At that time, due to the fear of the unknown, humans would pick up their weapons to protect themselves. Whether they were willing or not, they would clash with the monsters in the Fantasy Village. At that time, the side of the humans in the Fantasy Village would be unclear. Some would fight against the monsters for the sake of the people in the real world, some would stand on the side of the monsters, and some would stay out of it. At that time the true peace would be completely destroyed and the world would fall into turmoil. At that time, no matter how unwilling Purple was, the fantasy village in her heart would no longer exist. This was definitely not what Purple wanted to see. That was why Yukari said that Fantasyland might not be able to exist for too long. With her wisdom, Purple could also calculate the changes that would be brought to the humans and monsters of the two worlds when the real world and the fantasy village were completely connected. Therefore, the great boundless barrier could not be allowed to disappear. But now it only had a year left to exist. After a year, the Great Bali Barrier would be weakened by the barrier moderation until it could no longer exist. Then it would disappear. This fact weighed down on Blue and Orange so much that they could barely breathe. Wu Yan frowned. Is there no way to strengthen the Boli Great Barrier or build another Boli Great Barrier? With our strength, there's no way we can build a Great Barrier. Purple's voice was full of helplessness. Although the Great Barrier was built by the people of the fantasy village and the monsters, the one who built it was the Great Witch Bali. The Great Witch Bali? Wu Yan gasped. You're saying that only the Great Witch Bali has the ability to build a Great Barrier? Or rather, only the Great Witch Bali has the right to build a Great Barrier. Purple said seriously. The one who gave the Great Witch Bali the power to build a Great Barrier is the Dragon God. The Dragon God. The highest level existence in the fantasy village and also the highest level god in the fantasy village. The god worshipped by the Bali shrine was the Dragon God, and the witches who served the Dragon God were the Great Witch Bali. The last time the Dragon God appeared in the fantasy village was after the Great Barrier was set up, and the fantasy village was completely isolated from the outside world. Purple explained. At that time the Great Witch Bali prayed to the Dragon God, hoping to build a Great Barrier. She then borrowed the Dragon God's power to cover the entire fantasy village in the Great Barrier, isolating it from the outside world. Then if Ling Meng prayed to the Dragon God, she should be able to build another Great Barrier, right? Wu Yan hurriedly said. In that case it won't. Before Wu Yan could finish, Purple interrupted him. I suspect that the Dragon God no longer exists. Even though they had been shocked twice by Purple's words, they were still dumbfounded by Purple's words as if they had been knocked on the head by Purple's words. The Dragon God no longer exists? Why? In the past it was the same for the Great Barrier. Every 60 years, there would be a barrier moderation phenomenon. But at that time, there was never a situation where the Great Barrier was weakened during the moderation process. Purple laughed bitterly. In addition, the Great Barrier was originally built with the Dragon God's power as the source. In theory, as long as the Dragon God still exists, the Great Barrier will never weaken unless it is destroyed by external forces. This makes me suspect that the Dragon God no longer exists. In other words, you're just suspecting, but you don't have clear evidence to prove that the Dragon God no longer exists, right? Wu Yan said with some uncertainty. Since everything is just your guess, it might not be true. That's true, but I also don't have any evidence to prove that the Dragon God still exists. Purple shook her head. The weakening of the Great Barrier is a suspicious point. Whenever something major happens in the Utopia, the Dragon God will appear. This time the Great Barrier is in danger of disappearing, but the Dragon God still hasn't appeared. This is the second reason why I suspect that the Dragon God no longer exists. There's a third reason. Purple turned her head and looked at Boli Shrine. Witch Boli is the manager of Fantasyland, and she is also the one who borrowed the power of the Dragon God to build the Great Barrier. In the past, Witch Boli has a certain degree of sensitivity to the Great Barrier and knows what's going on in it. But this time, Ling Meng hasn't noticed the changes in the Great Barrier until now. She doesn't even know that the Great Barrier is weakening. Purple said worriedly. Besides, the Dragon God is the god worshipped by the Boli Shrine. The Boli Shrine should have the ability to listen to the Dragon God's voice, but I can't remember how long it has been since the Boli Shrine heard the Dragon God's voice. Gradually, even the Boli Shrine herself doesn't know who the god she serves is. Everyone fell silent when they heard this. Chapter 1860. Indeed, the witches who serve the gods should be able to listen to the voice of the gods they serve. Not to mention other things, there was a Xia shrine on the Monster Mountain. Not only could the witches there listen to the voice of the god they served, but they also lived with the god and lived together with him every day. However, the witches of the Boli Shrine Ling Meng, or rather the witches before Ling Meng, can't listen to the voice of the Dragon God. At least in Wu Yan's memory, he hasn't heard of it. At first, Wu Yan thought it was a special relationship with the Dragon God. After all, the dragon god doesn't actually exist in the fantasy paradise. He went somewhere unknown. Now, listening to Yukari, it seems that the witches were able to listen to the voice of the dragon god in the past. It wasn't until a long time ago that they suddenly lost this ability. Coupled with the fact that the Great Barrier that shouldn't be weakened as long as the dragon god exists is weakening, and Ling Meng, who should be able to sense the situation of the Great Barrier, hasn't noticed the change in the Great Barrier until now. All of this made Yukari suspect that the dragon god doesn't exist anymore. No matter what, the witches used the power of the dragon god to build the Great Barrier. Since she could sense the situation of the Great Barrier before, she should be able to sense it now. There are only two explanations for why she can't sense it now. Either that, or the connection between Bori and the god she served had been severed. Or it was the god who gave Boli the power to build the Great Barrier, and the god who connected Boli the Great Barrier to the Great Barrier could no longer maintain this connection. These two theories can't prove that the dragon god has actually disappeared. At most, it means that the connection between the dragon god and the witches no longer exists. But as Yukari said, these two theories can't prove that the dragon god still exists. In any case, all the signs point in one direction. The power of the dragon god that maintains the existence of the Great Barrier is disappearing. Maybe it's because something happened that you and I can't predict that the power of the dragon god disappeared in the fantasy paradise? Wu Yan couldn't help but say this. Maybe. The moment the Great Barrier is about to disappear, the dragon god will appear. The dragon god will appear. Who knows? Perhaps that's really the case. Yukari's eyes were already a little unfocused as she looked down at the fantasy land. But I can't pin my hopes on such an illusory possibility, and I won't bet the survival of fantasy paradise on whether the dragon god still exists or not. Wu Yan pondered for a while. He said, let's assume that the dragon god really no longer exists. What could be the reason? Who knows? Maybe it's because I don't have any faith anymore. Violet shrugged, pretending to be relaxed. After all, there are almost no people who truly believe in the dragon god in the fantasy village. Even which Boli has begun to forget the god she serves. No one went to the Boli shrine to worship, so the dragon god who had lost his faith disappeared. For the gods, faith was equivalent to the power of existence. Without faith, some would lose all their power and some would even disappear. The Xia shrine in the Monster Mountain moved to the fantasy land because it couldn't get any faith in the real world. It tried to collect the faith of the monsters in the fantasy land. The dragon god was a dragon, but at the same time, it existed as the god of the fantasy land. If there was no one who believed in the dragon god in the fantasy land, then the superstitious real world would be even more unlikely to have anyone who believed in the dragon god. Perhaps that's why the dragon god disappeared. Of course, the disappearance of the dragon god was only Violet's speculation, but judging from the current evidence, it was no longer impossible. Is there no other way? Wu Yan frowned deeply. Perhaps we can find other substitutes that are comparable to the Boli Great Barrier. I've been thinking about this before, but I haven't found anything. Yukari suddenly looked directly at Wu Yan, her eyes were shining as usual. But it's different now. Wu Yan didn't know what to say. What do you mean? It's extremely difficult to find a replacement for the Great Barrier. At least I haven't seen one yet. Yukari's gem-like eyes were filled with hope. But little Yan, you can definitely find one. For a moment Wu Yan almost didn't react, but after he did, he understood everything. There was something in his soul that was even more magical than the dragon god. System. Yukari couldn't find a replacement, but it didn't mean that the system couldn't find one. It's better to say that the moment I became your summoner, my thoughts were no longer limited to finding a replacement for the Great Barrier and maintaining the status quo of the fantasy paradise. Instead, I had greater ambitions. Ziyu said this sentence as if she was not going to stop until she was shocked to death. I want the fantasy land to become a real world, a world that no longer depends on the real world, a world that can only exist in illusions. This. Blue and Orange didn't understand Yukari's words. Wu Yan was the only one who trembled. He looked at Yukari, who is staring at him with a shocked expression, and he blurted out in shock. Don't tell me you want me to turn the fantasy land into a real world? What's so strange about that? Yukari smiled. Since there are so many dungeon worlds, little Yan, it's not impossible for the fantasy land to be separated from this world and become another one, right? Are you kidding me? Wu Yan almost laughed out loud. Do you really think the system has a way to create a new world? Or do you think I have that kind of ability? That's right. I think you have the ability to do that. Wu Yan was stunned again. Blue and Orange were at a loss again when Yukari nodded her head in agreement. It's not just because of the system. Xiao Yan, there are no god-level powerhouses in the instance worlds. You know this very well. Even the dragon god isn't a god-level powerhouse. As for you, sooner or later you will become a god-level powerhouse. With the system's help, little Yan, are you sure you don't have the ability to create a new world? Yukari's words were filled with anticipation for Wu Yan. You're underestimating your chances, little Yan. You're destined to soar to the top the moment you got the system. You're destined to reach a height no one can reach. This was Yukari's expectation for Wu Yan. Yukari might have been planning this from the moment she became Wu Yan's summon. She wanted Wu Yan to save the fantasy land that was about to disappear. She even wanted the fantasy land to be like the dungeon worlds Wu Yan had been to, a real world. At that time, Violet would no longer have to worry about what would happen to the fantasy village, nor would she have to worry about its destruction. By then, destroying the fantasy land would be as difficult as destroying an entire world. I see. Wu Yan laughed bitterly. I was a fool. How could the sage of the shifter Yakumo Yukari help me just because we're fused? Not only did she help me get rid of the Beast King, she even stood by my side. Wu Yan thought that with Yukari's shrewdness and intelligence she wouldn't protect them when they first met. Even in the fantasy land, there weren't many people who could make Yukari do that. When they first met, he even took Yukari's life. How could he be worthy of Yukari's help? During that time, Yukari got along really well with them. She even acted like an elder sister and took care of them. She even gave Wu Yan advice. Now Wu Yan knew that Yukari had been planning this earth-shattering event since then. As expected of Yukari, Wu Yan thought that Yukari didn't appear in front of him all this time because she wanted him to form an unbreakable bond with the people in the fantasy land. If that was the case, she wouldn't be able to sit by and watch the fantasy land perish. Perhaps at the beginning I did stay with you all for this purpose. I didn't reject you all. Yukari said after a moment of silence. But regardless of whether you believe it or not, I just want to say that to me now. You are already my family. Lady Yukari's family? Blue and Orange fell silent. Wu Yan smiled helplessly. Looks like I have to give it a try just because of what you've said. Yukari smiled. Her smile was very sincere. Chapter 1861. Fantasy Village, Red Devil Mansion. Stare. At this moment, Remilia, Patrice, and Zuiyi were standing in front of the round table on the platform. They had been gazing intensely at Wu Yan since 5 minutes ago, causing Wu Yan to reveal an unnatural expression. Of course, Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight weren't the only ones present. Fran and the little devil were also present. Fran even imitated Remilia's group and glared at Wu Yan. She tried her best to pretend to be angry, but in fact she looked adorable. As for the little devil, she was merely present. She didn't glare angrily at Wu Yan like any of the other girls present. The only emotion on her face and eyes was one of schadenfreude. Under the gazes of the 5 girls, some angry, some reproachful, some concerned, some scrutinizing, and some taking pleasure in his misfortune, Wu Yan could only close his mouth tightly and stand in front of the group of girls as if he was sitting on pins and needles. His expression was rather resentful. After what seemed like an eternity, the most impatient of them all, Remilia, finally took the initiative to denounce them. Tell me what happened in the 3 days that you disappeared. Yes. 3 days. It had already been 3 days since he had fainted from the battle with Delicate Fragrance Fengjian. In other words, he had fainted during the battle with Delicate Fragrance Fujimi. Wu Yan was unconscious for 3 whole days and only woke up today. Wu Yan had just learned of this matter. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stood here obediently and endured the intimidating gazes of Remilia, Patrice, Black Knight, Fran, and Little Devil. After all, he had disappeared for 3 days in front of a group of girls for no reason. Remilia and the others were definitely the most worried. However, Wu Yan was puzzled. Before I return. Ziming had clearly told her that before bringing her back to the Ba Yun family, she had already greeted the people from the Red Devil Mansion. Why were Remilia and the others still denouncing her? The people from the Yakumo family only said that you will be staying with them for a few days. He seemed to have seen through the doubts in Wu Yan's heart. Patrice replied with her usual indifferent tone. He answered Wu Yan's question. But what exactly is the reason? But he didn't explain anything at all. So that's how it is. Wu Yan was slightly relieved and scratched his cheek. Actually, it's not a big deal. Hence, Wu Yan told Remilia and the others everything that had happened after he left the Red Devil Mansion and went to the sunflower field 3 days ago. Although he said it as it is, he still knows how to hide some things that shouldn't be said. For example, the Great Barrier of Fantasy Town would collapse in a year. For example, Ziming suspected that the dragon god no longer existed. For example, Ziming planned to borrow Wu Yan's power to let Wu Yan create a world of his own and transcend from this world. In short, other than the conversation he had with Yukari in the sky above Gensokyo, Wu Yan basically told her everything he could. When they heard that Wu Yan fought with Yu Xiang, other than Fran who was at a loss and didn't know who Yu Xiang was, the rest of the girls were shocked. The Yu Xiang you're talking about, is it the flower demon in the sunflower field? Patrice didn't hide her shock. You actually fought with her? Oh. Seeing the shocked expressions of Remilia, Patrice and San Yi, other than Fran, Wu Yan raised an eyebrow. It seems like you all know Yu Xiang. We've only heard of her, we've never seen her before. Remilia raised her hand and curled her lips. I heard that the flower demon is on the same level as the demon sage in Fantasy Town. Lord Bai, did you really fight with her? Sui Yi seemed to know about delicate fragrance Feng Jian's terrifying strength and showed a concerned expression. Could it be that you stayed in Yakumo's house for 3 days because you were injured? Big brother is injured? This time Fran's delicate face showed a shocked expression and she almost jumped into Wu Yan's arms. Her eyes were filled with anxiety. Big brother is injured? Where's he? It's fine. I'm fine. I didn't spend the past 3 days recovering from my injuries, I just fainted. Wu Yan hurriedly explained. Look, aren't I fine now? In fact, Wu Yan wasn't wrong. With Wu Yan true ancestor's regenerative abilities, the injuries he sustained during the battle with Yuka Fujimi were all healed up. He didn't even need to recuperate for the past 3 days, he was only unconscious. Thus Wu Yan wasn't lying. Unfortunately, he could hide this from others but not Patrice. Although you don't seem to be injured, your mana seems to have weakened quite a bit. Patrice frowned and stared at Wu Yan as though she was trying to see through Wu Yan. Besides, even if you were injured, you should have recovered by now with your recovery ability, right? Wu Yan was at a loss for words. Although 3 days have passed, just as Patrice sensed, Wu Yan still hasn't recovered the mana he used in the battle with Yu Xiang. It couldn't be helped. Although a true ancestor's recovery ability was very strong, Wu Yan's mana recovery was also reflected in his mana recovery. Moreover, he cultivated the highest level of mana cultivation. The amount of mana he could recover was more than an ordinary mage. However, recovering a lot didn't mean he could recover all of it. Wu Yan's mana can only be described as an ocean. If his mana was converted to water, then even a real ocean wouldn't be able to compare to the amount of mana he has in his body. So much mana, but in the battle with delicate fragrance Fujimi, almost all of it was consumed. Under such circumstances, how could it be so easy to recover so much mana? Even with Wu Yan's astonishing mana recovery, he only recovered about 30% of his mana in 3 days. However, this wasn't a bad thing. After such a large consumption and recovery, Wu Yan's mana would definitely reach a new height. Thus, Wu Yan let his mana recover on its own while he enjoyed a leisurely time. In any case, even 30% of his mana was enough for Wu Yan to squander. Who would have thought that Patrice would see through it and catch a ready-made one? Well, it's just that the consumption is a bit high. Wu Yan could only rub his nose and laugh. Actually, I'm fine. You guys are the ones who are worrying too much. That better be the case. Remilia turned her head away and muttered softly. However, since she dares to bully my Scarlet Fiend Mansion's people, shouldn't I go over and teach her a lesson? Hearing this, the others didn't say anything, but Wu Yan was frightened. Where did Remilia get the confidence to say that she wanted to teach delicate fragrance Feng Jian a lesson? That's the Flower Lord of 4 Seasons, the strongest existence in Fantasy Village. Even after leveling up, Yukari only had a 50% chance of victory. She's a terrifying opponent that I can't defeat even if I go all out. This Remilia is only at the 9th rank. If she can't even defeat me in my normal state, how can she deal with an opponent that I can't defeat even if I go all out? I'm afraid that if they really go over, Remilia won't be teaching the other party a lesson. Instead, she'll be delivering fertilizer. My little lady, please don't be rash. Wu Yan bitterly smiled. I don't want to go to Sun Garden to save you. This time I won't be able to defeat you, Xiang. Wu Yan lost to Fujimi Yuka when he was at full power. Now he only has 30% of his mana left. If he were to fight Fujimi Yuka, he would lose without a doubt. If even Wu Yan is like this, there's no need to even mention Remilia. Even if the entire Scarlet Fiend Mansion comes out, the result won't change at all. It's the same even with Fran. It isn't that Remilia, Patrice, Xiaoyi, Fran and the others are too weak. It's that Yu Xiang is too strong. Who needs you to save me? Remilia was slightly angry. A mere flower demoness. Boom. As soon as this sentence left Remilia's mouth, a shocking explosion echoed in the Scarlet Fiend Mansion's hall. Chapter 1862. Boom. With such a huge explosion, the door of the Red Devil Hall suddenly exploded, rolling up thick smoke and fire. In an instant, it enveloped the entire hall of the Red Devil Hall. It didn't stop spreading until it reached the stairs. 3W, who's there? Remilia, Patrice, Little Devil and Little Devil were startled. Shortly after, Remilia revealed a furious expression. Someone actually came to cause trouble in the Red Devil Mansion? Patrice, Little Knight and Little Fiend seemed to have the same thought. They looked at the entrance of the Scarlet Devil Mansion with vigilance, indifference or fear. Only Fran seemed to have encountered something fun. Her red eyes were filled with excitement. Not to mention the young ladies, even Wu Yan knitted his brows slightly. He turned around and gazed at the entrance of the Red Devil Mansion. But shortly after he revealed a startled expression. At the entrance of the Red Devil Mansion that was engulfed in smoke and flames, a figure emerged from the smoke and flames and appeared before everyone's eyes. The owner of the figure had eye-catching emerald green curly hair. She wore a waistcoat with red and dark red checkered patterns and a knee-length skirt of the same style. She wore a yellow bow tie and a white long-sleeved shirt underneath the waistcoat. The young lady stood in the smoke and flames as though she was blocking the light that wasn't beneficial to her body. She held a parasol and sauntered into the hall. She scanned the surroundings with her red eyes and shifted her gaze to the platform at the end of the stairs. When she saw Wu Yan standing on the platform at the end of the stairs, the girl's bored eyes lit up and a gentle smile appeared on her face. Found you. It's you? Wu Yan was astonished. Why are you here? Hey. Remilia looked at Wu Yan and she pointed at Yuka Fujimi. Isn't she that flower demoness? The newcomer. Its delicate fragrance. That's why. That was why Wu Yan was so astonished. As the strongest flower queen in Fantasy Village, delicate fragrance Kaze could be said to be the embodiment of the strong. Not only did she like to be alone, but she also never went to any meaningless places. According to Wu Yan's understanding, delicate fragrance Feng Jian would only move about in his sunflower field territory. At most he would go to the human realm for a stroll when he was free. When he had nothing to do he would wander around the Boli Shrine. Aside from these three places he basically wouldn't go anywhere else. No. Feng Jian Yu Xiang came to the Red Devil Hall, and from the looks of it she seemed to be looking for him. Of course, no matter how astonished Wu Yan was, Yukari's entrance was too aggressive. When Remilia, Patrice, Black Knight and the others realized that she was here to provoke them, they immediately tensed up. The imp already hid behind Patrice. She didn't look like a tamed demon should protect her master. Fran was curiously sizing up delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yu Xiang. You're that flower demoness who bullied my Red Devil Hall's butler, right? Remilia looked down at delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yu Xiang with an unfriendly expression. Now you want to provoke my entire Red Devil Hall? Provoke Red Devil Hall? Delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yu Xiang glanced at Remilia and spoke indifferently. I'm not interested. Wah. Remilia's eyes widened, the anger on her face thickened. Are you looking down on my Red Devil Hall? You want me to look up to you? Delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yu Xiang thought for a moment and nodded. Then are you strong? In other words, if Remilia and the others were strong enough, delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yu Xiang wouldn't look down on Remilia and the others. On the contrary, if Remilia and the others were weak, delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yu Xiang wouldn't look up to them. This is delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yu Xiang. She's a battle maniac who only cares about fighting. Hee. Remilia smiled, but there was no smile in her eyes. Scarlet blood mist began to spread from her body. Do you want to try? Do you want to fight me? Delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's expression became a bit more motivated. Then I can play with you. Hearing this, Patrice, Sui Yi and the others immediately stood behind Remilia. One held a grimoire in one hand and the other held a glittering throwing knife between her fingers. Even the imps stood out and put on a defensive look. Fran also tilted her head and flew up. Seeing that the two sides were about to fight, Wu Yan extended his hand and stopped Remilia and the others. He lowered his head and looked at delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang. You haven't answered me. Why did you come to Red Devil Hall? I've already answered. Seeing that the fight isn't going to happen, Yuka Kaze's eagerness disappeared and she looked at Wu Yan. I'm here to find you. Find me. Delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang nodded absent-mindedly. Then she seemed to recall something. Oh right, when I came over, this monster guarding the door kept gesturing at me and even rushed over. You guys should know this guy, right? After that, Feng Jian Yuxiang's hand that wasn't holding the parasol suddenly dragged a person with circles in his eyes out and threw him on the ground. Tina! Sui Yi exclaimed. When Remilia saw Hong Meiling lying on the ground with circles in her eyes, anger flashed in her eyes. She wanted to go forward but was stopped by Wu Yan. I don't object to you coming to find me, but can't you use a more normal method? Wu Yan said helplessly. Knocking down the door and blowing up the door, people who don't know would think you're here to provoke me. I just don't like trouble. Yuka Kaze said as she looked at Wu Yan from head to toe. He sounded a bit disappointed. Looks like you haven't fully recovered yet. My injuries are healed, I just consumed a bit of mana. Wu Yan said with a strange expression. You didn't come to find me just to fight with me, right? It would be best if we could fight again. Delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang shook her head. But since you haven't recovered yet, forget it. Wu Yan noticed that Yukari Fujiki is back to her peak condition while he is still recovering his mana. Wu Yan didn't know if his final attack did any damage to Yuka Fujimi or not. If it did, how much damage would it have done to her? However, he knew that Yuka Fujimi's consumption of Yao power is no less than his. However, after 3 days, delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang has recovered to her peak condition. Wu Yan couldn't help but admire her. As expected of the embodiment of nature, even if she doesn't have an immortal body, her recovery ability is super strong. Coupled with the constant supply of energy from nature, it's not strange that delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang recovered. Putting aside her recovery ability, delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang won over Wu Yan in terms of mana and mana recovery. Wu Yan once again felt the power of delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang. Just as Wu Yan thought of this, a dark red color suddenly appeared in his eyes, making him stunned. He subconsciously reached out and caught the dark red color in his hand. Then Wu Yan was surprised to find out. That speck of crimson was a drop of blood that floated like a gem. What could it be, you? Wu Yan looked at delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang with an uncertain face. Is this your blood? Delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang smiled without saying anything, which is equivalent to admitting Wu Yan's guess. Why? Wu Yan asked puzzledly. Didn't you win the battle 3 days ago? Why are you giving me blood? Only by defeating delicate fragrance Fujimi would he be able to obtain her blood. This is the bet that delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang made. I don't need to follow a bet to decide who I want to give my blood to. After saying this, delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang looked at Wu Yan with eyes full of expectation. I remember you said that my blood can make you invincible, right? Although he didn't know what delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang was planning, Wu Yan still nodded. Then make a promise with me. Delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's voice showed a trace of excitement. When you become invincible, then fight with me. Fight again. This is delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's condition. It's very delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang's condition. Wu Yan clenched the drop of blood in his hand. After a long time he nodded, making delicate fragrance Feng Jian Yuxiang smile with satisfaction. Chapter 1863. Night fell quietly, whoosh. The hubbub continued to reverberate throughout the hall of the Red Devil Mansion. It was the sound of the monsters partying. Needless to say, Remilia held a banquet as usual and invited all sorts of monsters to party in the hall of the Red Devil Mansion. Apart from the demons who had been invited, Remilia and Fran were also participating in this banquet. As usual, Black Knight was busy at the banquet as the head maid. This time, Patrice didn't attend the banquet. Like the little devil, she stayed in her underground library and immersed herself in the world of books. Wu Yan didn't attend the banquet as well. As the butler of the Scarlet Devil Mansion, Xianxia told him that Wu Yan must be the host of the banquet and help the owner of the mansion, Remilia, prepare for the banquet. Wu Yan didn't forget about this. Just as Xianxia had requested, when Remilia decided to host this banquet, she mobilized all the fairy maids in the Red Devil Mansion to prepare the food and wine needed for the banquet. Then she sent people to invite the other Yaoma to the Red Devil Mansion to participate in the banquet. However, after all the preparations for the banquet were completed, the Yaoma came by invitation and Remilia brought an excited Fran out. Wu Yan managed to hide his presence from everyone. He left the banquet venue. It wasn't for any other reason but because he wasn't in the mood to attend the banquet. After returning to his room, or rather the room of Remilia, Fran and himself, Wu Yan laid on the bed and closed his eyes. The various events that happened in the fantasy village for the past 10 days flashed through his mind. It may sound inconceivable, but even with all the things that have happened, it doesn't change the fact that Wu Yan has only been in Gensokyo for 10 days or so. However, in these short 10 days many things had happened. Meeting Remilia, Patrice, Black Knight, Spirit Dream, Alice and the others, inexplicably becoming the butler of the Red Devil Mansion, consuming the medicine of the 8 senses Yonglin and triggering the 7 deadly sins. He got to know Gu Ming's Diju and Gu Ming's D-Love. He had sex with Patrice and Alice, indirectly leading to the collapse of the Bori Shrine. She fought with the strongest Lord of Flowers in the fantasy village. In the end, he also learned from Yukari that the fantasy village was about to cease to exist. One thing after another happened. It was hard to believe that all of this had happened in just a short period of 10 days. Not even a month had passed. And in this period of less than a month, Yi Zichen had already made his move. Wu Yan also encountered all kinds of strange girls in Fantasy Village. And have more or less. Perhaps it could not be severed, or perhaps it was a bond that they had only met once. Now that he thought about it, Wu Yan still felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. However, the Fantasy Village was an incredible place. What's so strange about some inconceivable things happening? Of course, there were inconceivable things, but there were also things that should be done as a matter of course. Thinking until here, Wu Yan opened his eyes and raised one of his hands. On the hand, 5 drops of crimson crystal clear, and beautiful blood that looked like gems were floating on top of it. Beep. Detected, blood essence containing power of fantasy, X1. Beep. Detected, blood essence containing power of realm, X1. Beep. Detected, blood essence containing power of eternity, X1. Beep. Detected, blood essence containing power of nature, X1. Beep. Detected, blood essence containing power of time, X1. Ding. Obtained blood essence containing power of fantasy, X1. Blood essence containing power of realm, X1. Blood essence containing power of eternity, X1. Blood essence containing power of nature, X1. Blood essence containing power of time, X1. Ding. Congratulations to user for completing Demigod Path's 4th phase quest. Ding. Demigod Path's 4th phase quest completed. User can now choose to leave the current dungeon world at any time. The dungeon world is now open to user. Upon entering the dungeon world again, the system will no longer issue any more dungeon quests. User can now enter and exit the dungeon world at will. After bringing Fran back to the Red Devil Mansion and battling with Remilia and Black Knight, Wu Yan obtained a drop of blood essence containing power of time from Black Knight's body. After going through the root of the 7 sins, Wu Yan entered the Forever Pavilion. He turned Kagaya of Pinglai Mountain into his summon and obtained a drop of essence blood imbued with the power of eternity from Kagaya. With the help of Remilia, Patrice and Black Knight, Wu Yan obtained a drop of blood essence containing power of fantasy from Red Dream. After the battle with Fengjian Yuxiang personally came to the Red Devil Mansion and gave Wu Yan a drop of blood essence containing power of nature. Not long ago, during the conversation with Yukari also gave Wu Yan a drop of blood essence containing power of realm before she left. Now the quest items for the Demigod Path's 4th phase quest, the 5 drops of blood essence containing power of mystery, have all been obtained. Wu Yan's Demigod Path's 4th phase quest is finally completed. This means that Wu Yan's goal of reaching the pinnacle of the demigod realm has taken a huge step forward. Wu Yan's thoughts seemed to have drifted to another world as he held the 5 drops of blood in his hand. His eyes that were looking at the ceiling gradually became unfocused. What's wrong? At this moment, a familiar voice resounded from the side and entered Wu Yan's ears. Reluctant to leave fantasy paradise? In the corner of the room right next to the bed Wu Yan was lying on, a pitch-black crack filled with ferocious eyes appeared in the space. Yukari, holding a paper fan, sat inside leisurely, only half of her body poking out. Like Wu Yan, she was looking at the ceiling. Although I want to tell you that it's not necessary, I'm not confident that I won't feel reluctant to leave fantasy paradise. Isn't this what you want to see as well? Wu Yan didn't look back, his voice was full of confusion. You want me to like fantasy paradise or something? Of course I'm happy that you like fantasy paradise. Yukari covered her mouth and smiled. However, if you don't want to leave, it will be quite troublesome for us. In another year, fantasy paradise will usher in the 60th anniversary of the Great Barrier's change. At that time, the Great Barrier that could no longer withstand the weakening of the barrier moderation phenomenon would collapse directly, connecting fantasy paradise to the outside world and causing unimaginable turbulence in the two worlds. A year's time was neither long nor short. For a great monster like Yukari who had lived for thousands of years, it was naturally not much different from a minute. For Wu Yan, if he didn't want to leave fantasy paradise and stayed in fantasy paradise, this year would pass very quickly. Yukari was counting on Wu Yan to turn fantasy paradise into a world for her. In order to do that, Wu Yan had to first become an existence that surpassed the dragon god. That was a god-level powerhouse. If Wu Yan couldn't become a god-level powerhouse before then, Yukari would indeed be troubled. Are you rushing me? Wu Yan said helplessly. There's no need to rush, right? As long as Wu Yan left this world, the time in this world would be frozen. Even if there was a summoner here, the time in this world wouldn't be frozen directly. The ratio of time would automatically be adjusted to 100 times the time in Wu Yan's world. That was, if Wu Yan spent 100 days in another world, only 1 day would pass in fantasy paradise. If a year passed in fantasy paradise, almost 100 years would have passed in Wu Yan's world. Using 100 years to become a god-level powerhouse? Wu Yan was still somewhat confident. I'm not rushing you, Purple said with a smile that made people unable to figure out what she was thinking. I just saw that you seemed to have something on your mind, so I came over to chat with you. Unfortunately, Wu Yan didn't feel that Yukari was being considerate at all. Peeping again? Wu Yan pursed his lips and asked. So, you agree that I should leave as soon as possible? If possible, I do need to buy some time. Yukari stopped smiling and sighed. 100 years actually isn't that long. Hearing this, Wu Yan fell silent and the entire room returned to silence. Until a certain moment Wu Yan suddenly said. Yukari, let's have a banquet. Chapter 1864. Fantasy Town, Alice's Mansion. In the Western style and girlish room, Alice was looking at a glowing sphere in front of her very attentively. Her eyes were unprecedentedly serious, and there was even a trace of amazement. This glowing orb was something that Wu Yan left for Alice not too long ago when he brought her out for a wild day of fun. After sending her home, Wu Yan mysteriously left this orb for Alice before he bid her farewell. At that time Alice had asked very doubtfully, wanting to know what this glowing sphere was. However, Wu Yan didn't answer Alice's question. Instead he said this to her. Put this into your puppet, you will find a surprise. After saying this, Wu Yan didn't reveal anything else and left without looking back. After that, Alice put the glowing sphere into one of her dolls the next day. Then Alice was shocked to find out that it was not the same as the previous one. That puppet had a life. Yes, it had a life. It was obviously a simple doll that could not be simpler. In terms of the degree of delicacy, it could not be compared with the Shanghai humanoid and Penglai humanoid around Alice. It was not like the Shanghai humanoid and Penglai humanoid, which Alice did not know how much effort it took to have intelligence similar to that of humans. However, such a simple puppet not only easily had intelligence comparable to that of Shanghai and Penglai, but also could do things that Renhai and Penglai couldn't do. For example, it didn't need Alice's manipulation. This puppet could move freely on its own. For example, it didn't need Alice's adjustment and teaching. This puppet could speak human language by itself, which was something that Renhai and Penglai couldn't do. For example, it didn't need Alice's guidance. This puppet could distinguish what it could do and what it couldn't do. It could also read and learn. What was even more amazing was that once Alice also saw that the puppet had a desire for the food it ate. If it wasn't for the fact that this puppet didn't have a digestive system and its body was full of wood, it would probably be able to eat. This series of behavior was extremely human. Some couldn't even be done by Renhai and Penglai. It didn't need Alice's personal manipulation. He was completely self-disciplined as if he had a real life. How could this not shock Alice? Unfortunately, it was just a simple puppet. Even if it had life, its body couldn't support it to carry out so many human-like actions, and it broke down after a few days. Although Alice felt that it was a pity, fortunately the glowing sphere was still there. So, Alice quickly took out the glowing sphere and studied it from the morning until now. The more she studied it, the more surprised she was. This was because Alice discovered that this glowing sphere seemed to have the same effect as the Book of Witchcraft. There were spells recorded in the grimoire. If a mage had a grimoire, they could inject magic into the grimoire. They didn't need to cast the spell themselves to be able to use the spells recorded in the grimoire. This glowing sphere was the same. Seemed to contain some kind of magic. It was because of this spell that the doll with the glowing sphere had life. In other words, if the glowing sphere was compared to a magic book, then the magic recorded in it would be the magic of life. Alice was shocked and excited at the same time. What shocked Alice was that she had never heard of any magic that could bring about life. Alice was excited because she saw a bright path ahead. Alice knew that if she could research this magic of life, then all her dolls would be able to have life in the future. It wasn't hard to imagine how attractive this was to Alice, who had always wanted to develop a fully autonomous humanoid with life. However, Alice found that it was more difficult than she thought to research the magic in this glowing sphere. After all, this glowing sphere wasn't like the Book of Witchcraft that could be opened directly. Although the mage's magic attainments had to reach a very high level in order to read the original Book of Witchcraft, this glowing sphere in front of her didn't even have the means to open it. So how should she research this magic of life? Alice was a little distressed. After a long time she made this decision. Let's put it in another doll first and see if I can get some inspiration from studying that doll. After making up her mind, Alice's hands started to itch for the first time in a long time. In front of her was a magical item that could bring life to a doll. And the next doll she made would be able to obtain life through it. Although this doll with life wasn't completely created by Alice alone, it had always been Alice's dream to create a doll with life. Now, knowing that the next doll she made would have life, even if it wasn't all by herself, Alice was very excited. And of course this time, Alice wouldn't make a simple doll. Since it's a doll with life, then at least the degree of delicacy should be on the same level as Shanghai and Penglai. With that said, Alice picked up the glowing sphere. At this moment, the door of Alice's room was pushed open with a loud dong sound. At the same time, a loud voice rang out. "Alice, I'm here to see you." The sudden muffled sound and shout gave Alice a fright. Her hand trembled and the glowing sphere flew high up into the air. It was as if Alice had thrown it out. "Ah!" Alice cried out in shock. It was as if she could see this most important prop breaking into 7 or 8 pieces like a porcelain bowl. Her cry was filled with fear. Fortunately, the direction the glowing sphere fell towards was none other than the entrance to Alice's room. So Wu Yan, who wanted to give Alice a surprise, just opened the door and saw a familiar glowing sphere flying in his direction. Wu Yan subconsciously caught the glowing sphere in his hand and said in confusion, "Isn't this Eve's heart?" This is the Eve's heart that Wu Yan made for Alice. I say Alice. Wu Yan looked at Alice, who was patting her chest with dissatisfaction. "Even if you don't like my gift, you don't have to throw it away, right? Who wants to throw it away?" Alice stepped forward and glared at Wu Yan fiercely. Then she carefully took the Eve's heart. "I can't wait to treasure it." After saying that, Alice checked the Eve's heart in her hand. She didn't breathe a sigh of relief until she made sure there were no cracks on it. Seeing this, Wu Yan was a little happy but also a little unhappy. Of course, he was happy because Alice was satisfied with her gift. Moreover, the gloomy look from before had completely disappeared. Now she was not much different from before she had sex with Wu Yan. Obviously, Alice has gradually walked out of this matter and calmly faced it. As for the dissatisfaction, naturally it was because after he came, Alice still paid attention to Eve's heart, and ignored him. Sigh. Wu Yan became melancholy. When you have a doll, you lose your husband. Alice's pretty face blushed, but she pretended not to understand and changed the topic. This time, what's the matter? If you want to talk about something, there is indeed something. Wu Yan scratched his cheek. I'm here to invite you to a banquet. A banquet? Alice paused for a moment. If there was one thing that was most famous in Fantasy Village, it would be banquets. Be it when Witch Bully was dealing with the mutation or when some demons or humans were bored, they would hold 1 or 2 banquets to pass the time, or in the name of celebration. Alice likes to attend all kinds of banquets. Thus, when she heard that Wu Yan is here to invite her to a banquet, she nodded nonchalantly. Got it. When is the banquet? Let me know, I'll be there. Looking at Alice's nonchalant attitude, Wu Yan got even angrier. The banquet he held before leaving Fantasy Village was ignored by his own woman just like that? Looks like it's been too long since she was taught a lesson. At an angle that Alice couldn't see, Wu Yan smiled sinisterly and quietly closed the door. Ah! The next moment, Alice's scream rang out. It didn't take long for it to turn into panting and begging for mercy. Chapter 1865. Underground World, Earth Spirit Hall. In Gu Ming Diju's room, at the center of the room, Gu Ming Diju was holding a book and reading it with great interest. To Gu Ming Diju, who could directly read minds and know what others were thinking, even knowing the darkness in many people's hearts, reading was a very meaningful thing. This was because Gu Ming could only understand the content of the book through reading. It was not like when he was facing a human, where he could naturally know what the other person was thinking as long as he opened his third eye. Therefore, reading was one of Gu Ming's favorite activities. There was no other activity like reading. Compared to Gu Ming Diju, who was immersed in the world of books, Gu Ming Diju seemed to be entertaining himself. While Gu Ming Dijue was reading the book with great interest, Gu Ming Dijue's love was lying on the floor of Gu Ming Dijue's room. She didn't care whether her clothes were dirty or not. She stared at the cat with fire on its tail in front of her with big, round, beautiful eyes wide open. That was the famous fire cat in the underground world. The fire cats in Earth Spirit Hall were all Gu Ming Diju's pets. It could also be said that they were Gu Ming Diju's pets. At this moment, Gu Ming Diju was chatting with the fire cat in front of her to pass time. Hey, why do you have fire on your tail? Meow. The fire cat tilted its head and looked confused. Although this fire cat could not turn into a human like the fire cat Phosphorus, it already had the basic intelligence. It was not just this fire cat. In Earth Spirit Hall, Gu Ming Diju's pets all had a certain level of intelligence. Otherwise, why would Gu Ming Diju's love let his pets do all the work in Earth Spirit Hall? Therefore, this fire cat could understand Gu Ming Diju's words. Unfortunately, although it could understand, it could not speak. It could not speak. It didn't know how to do that. It could only give the simplest answer. Of course, such an answer was basically, other than Gu Ming Diju, who could directly read its heart, it was unlikely that anyone else would know what it meant, including Gu Ming Diju. What is meow? Gu Ming Diju expressed that the two languages did not seem to be from the same country. She tilted her head. His face was filled with doubt. Will there be fire in your tail if you say meow? Meow. Meow. Lian is meowing, but there is no fire in her tail. Meow. I almost forgot that Lian doesn't have a tail. Meow. Meow. Why is it still meow? Lian started to pout, her face filled with dissatisfaction. Don't you want to talk to Lian? Meow. The flame cat also expressed that it was under a lot of pressure to have such a naive and romantic little sister who didn't know anything. Just like that, the extremely strange conversation between the human and the cat continued in the form of self-entertainment. Other than the man and the cat, the only person present, Gu Ming Diju, did not notice this rather annoying scene at all. It was not that Gu Ming Diju did not care about his sister, but first of all, Gu Ming Diju's attention was completely focused on the book in his hand, so she did not have the spare energy to pay attention to anything else. Secondly, that was also the reason why Gu Ming Diju had fallen in love with her. Gu Ming Diju had sealed his soul and had the ability to control his subconscious. Gu Ming Diju's sense of existence was originally weak, so even if she passed by people's sight, it was possible that she would not be noticed. Because of this, and because Gu Ming Diju's attention was focused on the book in his hand, so even if Gu Ming Diju's voice and the cat's meowing were echoing in the room, Guming Diju did not notice. From various aspects, this was indeed a very strange scene. At least he directly came to the room with the magic of space transfer. Wu Yan, who had just come out of Alice's room, saw this scene and was speechless for a long time. If one looked carefully, one would notice that there was a lingering trace of joy between Wu Yan's brows. It was the lingering pleasure after he did something inexplicable to Alice under the circumstances of not knowing whether it was punishment or venting his dissatisfaction in his heart. Now, when he saw this strange scene in front of him, the lingering pleasure quickly disappeared, leaving behind only an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. After a while, Guming Diju, who was still bored talking to the flame cat, noticed that there seemed to be another person in the room. She turned her head and looked in the direction of Wu Yan. Then her eyes brightened and she jumped up happily and cheered out loud. Brother! Brother! No matter how he did not notice the existence of Guming Diju could not hear Guming Diju's loud voice. Then Guming Diju raised his head in confusion and looked forward. Then he saw Guming Diju's face was full of excitement, and she rushed to Wu Yan. Suddenly Guming Diju was stunned. When he found that it was Wu Yan, his eyes also brightened. He put down the book in his hand and stood up with some surprise. Brother! Guming Diju jumped in front of Wu Yan excitedly, looking at Wu Yan with big sparkling eyes. Her eyes were full of joy. Is it you? Did you come to see Diju? Looking at Guming Diju's strangely happy and cute look, Wu Yan could not help but smile. He reached out his hand and touched Guming Diju's little head. I came to see you guys. Are you happy? Happy. Guming Diju also reached out her hand and hugged Wu Yan's leg like a koala bear, laughing softly. Keeping the look of touching Guming Diju's head, Wu Yan raised his eyes and looked forward. He met Guming Diju's eyes. Looking at Guming Diju's surprised look, he smiled and greeted him. How have you been recently? Listening to this most ordinary greeting, Guming Diju felt touched from the bottom of his heart. It could not be helped. Because of the ability to read minds, Guming Diju knew everything about others. He was hated by almost all humans, demons and gods. When did he hear such words? Just this simple greeting made Guming Diju very satisfied. It also made Guming Diju feel that meeting Wu Yan was a very lucky thing. I just read books when I have nothing to do and walk around Earth Spirit Hall with Alin and Akong. Guming Diju smiled gently. Also, Diju has not been running around recently. With Diju accompanying me, it is not boring. Is that so? Wu Yan hesitated for a bit before asking. Have you always been like this in Earth Spirit Hall? Guming Diju did not want to hide anything from Wu Yan and nodded seriously. No one would welcome me anywhere else. I don't like to run around. Hearing this, Wu Yan scratched his face and showed a troubled expression. This made Guming Diju curious. What's wrong? No. Wu Yan smiled helplessly. Originally, I wanted to invite you to a banquet on the surface. Who knew that you don't like to run around? Banquet? Guming Diju was stunned. Banquet? Guming Diju looked very interested. Diju saw something called a banquet when Diju went to the surface. It was very fun. Banquets are for fun. Wu Yan patted Guming Diju's head lovingly. How about it? Do you want to go? I want to go, I want to go. Guming Diju shouted without hesitation. Diju wants to go. Diju. Guming Diju frowned and scolded her. You can't be so rude. Sister, let's go to that banquet. Guming Diju looked pitifully at Guming Diju. Diju wants to go. But Guming Diju was in a difficult position. If you really don't want to go, I won't force you. Wu Yan comforted her. As for Diju, if you trust me, how about letting me take care of her? No, it's not that I don't want to go. Guming Diju shook his head and sighed. It's just that, will the people on the surface welcome us? Hearing this, Wu Yan remembered. Previously, the demons in the underground world had brought some trouble to the surface. Even the laziest Ling Meng was busy for a period of time. After that, Ling Meng banned the demons from the underground world from entering the surface. It was no wonder that Guming Diju thought so. Leave this to me. Wu Yan patted his chest. I'll make it clear to Ling Meng. I see. Guming Diju was slightly moved. After seeing Guming Diju's pleading look, he nodded. Wu Yan smiled. Chapter 1866. Fantasy Village, Lost Bamboo Forest. Step by step, Wu Yan walked on the mountain path leading to the Eternal Pavilion. He seemed to be reminiscing about the environment in the lost bamboo forest. He didn't use spatial magic and walked like an ordinary person. His gaze was focused on the area in front of him. Wu Yan took a good look at the brand new house that looked a bit strange. In the courtyard of the house, Xian was holding some herbs and identifying them with a troubled expression. "Master, which herb are you looking for?" As Yonglin's disciple, Xian's fighting strength wasn't that great. She wasn't even at the 9th level. She was just hovering around the 8th level. It wasn't that Xian didn't have any talent. Yonglin didn't want Xian to become a disciple with great fighting strength. Instead, she wanted Xian to be her successor in the medical field. It seemed like she wanted Xian to inherit her medical skills. Xian, on the other hand, had been with Yonglin for quite some time now. When it came to herbs, Xian believed that it was almost impossible for her to not recognize them. But every time Xian thought so, Yonglin seemed to be able to see through Xian's mind. She would find some plants that Xian had never seen before and let Xian identify them. Clearly this time Xian was stumped by the herbs that Yonglin had found from God knows where. Don't tell me they aren't herbs? It was inevitable that Xian would have such doubts. After all, there was once when Yonglin grabbed a bunch of weeds outside and asked Xian to identify them. Xian studied them for a dozen days but couldn't figure out that they were just ordinary weeds. It wasn't that Xian was stupid. Yonglin was too smart in her heart. Xian didn't expect Yonglin to trick her by grabbing a bunch of weeds. She mistook them for herbs. Thus Xian didn't think that they were weeds. She thought they were herbs that looked like weeds. Wu Yan chuckled when he saw Xian struggling with the plant. His laughter attracted Xian's attention. "Master Bai?" Xian was startled by his words. Then he quickly stood up. He bowed respectfully to Wu Yan. "Lord Bai." "Good morning, Xian." Wu Yan beckoned to Xian. "Are you busy?" "I'm not in a hurry. I'm just identifying some herbs." Xian replied with some awkwardness. "Are you looking for Her Highness? Then I'll go and report to Master." "I am indeed here to look for Hui," Wu Yan said strangely. "But I'm looking for Hui Yi. Why are you reporting to Yonglin instead?" "This." Xian hesitated for a moment, feeling a little awkward. Then he said carefully. "Master said that if Lord Bai comes to look for Her Highness, we must report to her first." "This Yonglin?" Wu Yan was speechless and had no choice but to compromise. "There's no other way. Although it's very troublesome, this is the only way. Thank you, Lord Bai." Xian smiled gratefully at Wu Yan and walked into the Forever Pavilion to report to Yonglin. After waiting for about 10 minutes or so, the bored Wu Yan sensed an extremely restrained but strangely powerful and mysterious familiar presence slowly approaching him from within the UCI Pavilion. A few seconds later, the door of the Forever Pavilion opened and Yonglin walked out. She looked at Wu Yan and said with a smile. "What? You want to look for trouble in the Forever Pavilion after fighting with the flower demon in the sunflower field?" Wu Yan flinched when he heard this. He was surprised by this. I know. Yonglin shook her head. "I think I'm not the only one in the fantasy village who knows. Many people should have sensed the aura you leaked when you fought with the flower demon that day." Yonglin subconsciously glanced at Wu Yan. She's a bit surprised by his reaction. That day when Wu Yan fought with Fengjian Yuxiang, Yonglin sensed his aura and secretly paid attention to it. Although it wasn't something that could be casually mentioned, Yonglin saw the entire battle that day. Naturally, she also saw Wu Yan's combat power. To be honest, Yonglin didn't expect Wu Yan to be able to fight Fengjian Yuxiang to a draw. That's a result that Yonglin might have to risk everything to achieve. Yonglin knew that Wu Yan wasn't strong enough to fight Fengjian Yuxiang to a draw. Wu Yan was barely qualified to fight her, let alone fight Fengjian Yuxiang. Coupled with the fact that she saw Wu Yan using the power of realm manipulation that only Yukari can do, Yatsuki guessed that Wu Yan must have used some sort of method to temporarily increase his power. That's how he achieved such a result. However, no matter what, Wu Yan had the ability to fight Fengjian Yuxiang, Yakumo Yukari, or herself. This was basically confirmed. Yonglin felt that it was necessary to re-examine Wu Yan. "That's the ability you got from the system, right?" Yonglin looked at Wu Yan with eyes that seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. "The method that allows people to temporarily gain power beyond their own and Yakumo Yukari's ability. Wu Yan smiled awkwardly when he saw Yonglin's eyes that looked like she wanted to dissect him. Rather than saying that I got it from the system, it's better to say that I got it from my own blood. Bloodline. Yonglin narrowed her eyes slightly. Vampire's ancestor? You even know that? Wu Yan was puzzled by her reaction. Since you know everything, why are you still asking me? If I could really know everything, I wouldn't have let you have such a relationship with the princess. Yonglin's tone was a little cold. It's just that I've seen a creature of the night just like you over the eons. I don't know how long ago. Have you seen the ancestor? Wu Yan mused for a bit before he finally said something like that. Have you seen the dragon god? Dragon god? Yonglin didn't expect Wu Yan to ask such a question. She frowned slightly. You mean the dragon god in Fantasy Village? You must be one of the oldest existences in Fantasy Village, right? Wu Yan stared at Yonglin. The dragon god appeared in Fantasy Village for the last time when Bori was building the barrier. Fitzhugh, you must have seen the dragon god, right? Fantasy Village used to be a remote place in the world before it was isolated from the outside world. In other words, Fantasy Village existed before the dragon god appeared for the last time. If Yonglin was already in the Fantasy Village at that time, she should have seen the dragon god who appeared in the Fantasy Village for the last time. However, Yonglin shook her head while Wu Yan was thinking. No, you're wrong, I haven't seen the dragon god. Wu Yan was stunned. Indeed, the princess and I already existed in the Fantasy Village before the Great Barrier was built. Yonglin sighed. But at that time, in order to avoid the people from the moon, the princess exiled the entire Forever Pavilion to the world of Forever. It wasn't until recently that the Forever Pavilion really appeared in Fantasy Village. You know this, so neither the princess nor I have seen the dragon god. I see. Wu Yan nodded with disappointment. Then there's no other way. Why did you suddenly mention the dragon god? Yonglin Yagi asked in confusion. You're not the kind of person who would miss the gods that are almost forgotten by everyone, right? Well, there are all kinds of reasons. Wu Yan said perfunctorily, then smiled bitterly. By the way, I'm here for Kaguya. Where is she? You're looking for the princess because of the banquet, right? Yonglin glanced at Wu Yan. That crow seems to have gotten the news from somewhere and is spreading it everywhere. The Forever Pavilion also got the news, so you don't have to run around anymore, just go back and prepare. Paparazzi. Wu Yan was stunned, then pursed his lips. I almost forgot about her. I should have just let her invite her so I don't have to run around. Just like that, the news that a grand banquet was about to be held spread throughout Fantasy Town. The venue of the banquet was Bori Shrine. Chapter 1867. Fantasy Village, Bori Shrine. Today early in the morning, there were people flying in from afar and landing in front of the newly built Bori Shrine. In fact, although they were called humans, there were only a few real humans among the many existences that came to the Bori Shrine. The rest were all monsters, fairies, spirits, and other races that only existed in fantasy villages. There was only one reason why so many monsters, spirits, and other kinds of existences would fill the open space in front of the Bori Shrine. That is, today a grand banquet will be held in the Bori Shrine. It was precisely because the banquet was held in the Bori Shrine that so many monsters, spirits, and other kinds of existences came. After all, if there is a place in Fantasy Village that is the most famous, it is definitely the Bori Shrine. Although the Bori Shrine is not the only shrine in Fantasy Village, the importance of the Bori Shrine to Fantasy Village is even more important than the various races that live here. Not for other reasons, just because without the Bori Shrine Fantasy Village would not exist. The Bori shaman who managed the Fantasy Village was here. The Bori shaman was also the one who established the Great Barrier and gave birth to the current Fantasy Village. Not to mention, the Bori Shrine also worshipped the highest level god in the Fantasy Village, the Dragon God. Of course now. In Fantasy Village, except for those who have lived for a long time, basically no one knows about the existence of the Dragon God. This was not surprising. The Dragon God had never shown his miracles, unlike the Guardian Arrow Shrine on the Demon Mountain. As long as someone offered faith, the god there would definitely give back a certain miracle. It made people wonder whether the so-called highest-level god in the Fantasy Village really existed. And this is also one of the phenomena that made the Purple Association doubt whether the Dragon God still exists. No one knows whether the god worshipped exists or not. In addition, the Bori shrines, which is lazy all day long. They were cold and indifferent to everyone. On the way to the shrine, Monsters that were good at attacking humans would appear from time to time. Due to various reasons, very few humans would come to the Bori Shrine to worship. However, this does not affect the popularity of the Bori Shrine in Fantasy Village. Even if the god they worshipped was no longer around, there were only a few worshippers. Magus Bo Li was the manager of Fantasy Village on the surface. Furthermore, she would come out from time to deal with troublesome demons and resolve any anomalies. The most well-known place in Fantasy Village was undoubtedly the Bori Shrine. Therefore, even though the Bori Shrine was not very popular, there were still many monsters and even great monsters who liked to visit the Bori Shrine. Needless to say, the moment they heard that the Bori Shrine was going to hold a banquet, basically all the well-known, unknown, powerful, and not-so-powerful monsters in the Fantasy Village came here in groups of 2s and 3s, filling the open space in front of the Bori Shrine with people. Standing in the hallway of the Bori Shrine, Ling Meng looked at the noisy area in front of her. There were at least a few hundred demons, and Ling Meng fidgeted with her jet-black hair, almost causing the huge red bow to fall off. Is it so difficult to spend a few days leisurely? Well, isn't this good? Marissa stood beside Ling Meng. Unlike the resentful Ling Meng, Marissa appeared to be in high spirits. This banquet is sponsored by the little brother from the Yakumo family. You don't have to pay for it. Furthermore, you can eat and drink for free. That's very enviable. We can eat and drink for free, but we can forget about the banquet. Princess Ling Meng did not hesitate to say those words. It wasn't easy for me to rebuild my shrine. What if these guys cause me trouble again? What should I do? It seems that Wenwen and I have been the ones who have been rebuilding the shrine. Marissa laughed dryly and muttered. Besides, it's not like you don't have any benefits. The bow on Ling Meng's head shook slightly and she snorted coldly. However, no matter how one looked at it, it seemed like she was faking it. What are you talking about? Hee hee. Marissa let out an extremely mischievous laugh. Do you think I don't know? The little brother from the Yakumo family has already paid you for the venue, right? How is that possible? Ling Meng's face stiffened slightly and she put on a fake smile. How could I possibly agree to lend the venue to such a troublesome person? Is that so? It was rare for Marissa to speak in a tone as if she had the upper hand. She was immensely pleased with herself. Stop hiding it, Ling Meng. When the little brother from the Yakumo family came to borrow the venue from you, he said that he would pay you for the venue. Wenwen saw it and told me everything. You can't lie to me. Wenwen. Ling Meng was startled and she clenched her teeth. It's that damned paparazzi again. See if I don't teach you a lesson. Ling Meng, just confess. Marissa patted Ling Meng's shoulder and said in a gentle tone. Why don't I go find the little brother from the Yakumo family and tell him personally that you won't be borrowing the venue for this banquet? You won't be charging him for the venue either. How is that possible? Ling Meng's eyes widened. I am the noble Boli witch. How can I let the gold in my hands fly away? Hearing this, even with Marissa's thick nerves, the corner of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. Let's not talk about the relationship between gold coin and the witch. Just the words noble character and unquestionable integrity, when used on Princess Ling Meng, was already worth pondering over. You actually hid such a big matter from me. On the other side, Remilia was hovering in the air in a corner of the noisy crowd. She angrily shouted at Wu Yen, whose ears were hurting from being yelled at. Why didn't I know that you were planning to hold such a big banquet? Calm down. Calm down. Wu Yen hurriedly waved his hand in an attempt to calm Remilia down. I saw that you were holding a banquet in the Red Devil Mansion, so I didn't tell you. That's that. That's that. Remilia yelled in a frenzy. Such a big banquet. If others find out that the Red Devil Mansion's butler paid for it and the Red Devil Mansion didn't contribute a single cent, where am I supposed to put my face? You said it yourself. This is this and that is that. I didn't hold this banquet as the Red Devil Mansion's butler. Wu Yan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Besides, if it doesn't work, I can just tell others that the Red Devil Mansion is the one behind this banquet. All right, your head. Remilia's anger didn't lessen. It won't take long for people to dig out the truth about this matter. Do you think that paparazzi has been faking it all this time? Remy, calm down first. Patrice silently closed the book in her hand. She seemed to be annoyed by the ruckus and said helplessly. The banquet is already held and most of the invited guests are here. The banquet will officially begin soon. Even if you keep making a ruckus here, it won't be of any use. Yes. Now isn't the time to quarrel. Rumilia snapped out of her daze and glared at Wu Yan before turning to Zui Yi. While there's still time, Zui Yi, hurry up and prepare some dishes and wine for the banquet. At the very least, these things should be provided by us. That way, others won't have anything to say. Yes, miss. Eldest young miss. Bu Yi bowed, and with a flash he disappeared on the spot. Wu Yan could only roll his eyes. In about half an hour the banquet would officially begin. Even if Zui Yi had the ability to manipulate time, it would be very tiring to prepare all the dishes and wine needed for the banquet during this period of time. This Rumilia actually made Zui Yi work so hard just for a bit of face. It seems like I have to find some time to teach her a lesson. Wu Yan's gaze wandered between Rumilia and Patrice for a while before he asked. Right, where's Fran? Just as Rumilia was about to reply, a series of hurried footsteps entered Wu Yan's ears. Not long later, Wu Yan felt a weight on his back as two petite figures appeared. Big brother. Fran's face was slightly flushed and she seemed to be very happy. Big brother. The other was Gu Ming's love. Chapter 1868. Lian. Looking at the naughty Furan who is lying on his back with her head peeking out from his shoulder, Wu Yan laughed. You're here? Gu Ming Lian nodded his head heavily, his little feet dangling in the air, swaying non-stop. Lian is here and there's a lot of people with her. Gu Ming's love, who had come to the surface more than once, naturally had seen the scene of the banquet. Moreover, after the mutation caused by the monsters in the underground world was resolved by Ling Meng, the fantasy paradise held a banquet as usual. At that time, Gu Ming's love had also participated. However, the scale of the banquet then was on a completely different level compared to this one. Putting everything else aside, the number of monsters attending the banquet alone was so large that even Gu Ming's love was surprised. Where's your sister? Wu Yan pinched Gu Ming Lian's nose. Don't tell me that you abandoned your sister and ran over here by yourself? That's not bad. Lian is not that bad. Besides, I won't let Lian come alone. Gu Ming Lian wrinkled her nose and pointed in a direction. Sister is over there. Wu Yan, Rumilia, and Patrice looked in the direction Gu Ming Lian pointed. Gu Ming Lian was looking around with Spirit Wu Lu Kong and Flaming Cat Phosphor. They seemed to be looking for something. Gu Ming Lian scanned the surroundings, nimbly passing by demons and walking towards them. Sister! Gu Ming Lian shouted. I'm here. Gu Ming Dijue looked over when he heard Gu Ming Dijue. When he saw Furan and Gu Ming Dijue lying on Wu Yan's back, he couldn't help but grin as he walked over. Sorry to keep you waiting. Gu Ming Lian smiled. I'm not late, right? Thank goodness the banquet hasn't started yet. Wu Yan greeted Gu Ming Lian and waved at Spirit Wu Lu Kong and Flaming Cat Phosphor. How you? Facing this one and only friend that their master thought about every day, Spirit Crow Lukong and Flaming Cat Phosphor did not dare to be negligent. They quickly bowed. Why are you two here? At this moment, Rumilia frowned and glared at Wu Yan. You even informed the people of Earth Spirit Hall but not me. What is the meaning of this? Oh please. You know they live in the underworld. They'll need some time to get here. Of course I have to inform them in advance. Rumilia seemed to be brooding over the fact that he didn't inform her beforehand. Wu Yan didn't know what expression he should show. Also, it's not like I didn't inform you. It's not like you came uninvited, so why are you still brooding over it? I don't care. Rumilia said willfully. If there's a next time, you have to inform me first. Do you hear me? Yes. Wu Yan could only reply helplessly. Patrice, Gu Ming Lian and the others found it funny. And in just a short while, another familiar figure appeared on the scene. Lord Bai. Following this voice, 3 figures appeared in Wu Yan's vision. One of them is a girl with bunny ears who greeted Wu Yan just now. One of them was a young girl with a cold and elegant temperament walking at the side. There was also an elegant young lady who walked in front of them. She was dressed in a Japanese outfit and had long silky black hair that flowed like a waterfall. She looked like a princess. They were Penglai Mountain's Hui Yi Yonglin Ba Yi and Ling Xian. How lively! Penglai Mountain's Hui Yi looked at the lively scene and seemed to be lost in thought. How long has it been since this concubine saw such a lively scene? Since betraying the moon, Huey of Mount Penglai had been living in the Forever Pavilion for a long time. He did not even appear in people's sight when the Forever Pavilion held an exhibition. He hid in his room and lived an otaku life. Thus, Penglai Mountain's Huey didn't know how long it had been since she went out. She also didn't know how long it had been since she saw such a lively scene. Yonglin Bai also seemed to be reminiscing. Now that I think about it, it's been a long time since I saw so many people. At this moment, these two girls who didn't seem to be over 20 years old were filled with an aura of vicissitudes. It was hard for people to get used to it. Wu Yan was the only one who teased him. Now you finally know how much of an otaku you are? This sentence was naturally directed at Penglai Mountain's Hui Yi. As a lady of a noble family, it's not strange that you don't go out. Penglai Mountain's Hui Yi finally recovered from her absent-minded state. She dragged her long sleeves and covered the corner of her mouth. Her beautiful eyes curved into crescent moons. Besides, the human heart is very complicated. For a weak girl like me, if I run around, I don't know when I will be abducted by a strange uncle. Saying these words, Mount Penglai's Huey still acted as if it was a serious matter, tenderly stroking his cheek. Without a doubt, Mount Penglai Kagaya was a great beauty. She was a woman who was much more beautiful than those who called themselves beauties. Otherwise, she wouldn't have conquered an entire era with her beauty and written her own monogatari. When such a great beauty touched the side of her face, it was indeed breathtaking. Even Remilia, Guming Diju, and the other young girls couldn't help but cast sidelong glances. Wu Yan couldn't help but retort. Let's not talk about whether you're weak or not. Only a little loli would be abducted by a strange uncle. You're not a delicate loli. You won't attract a strange uncle. Don't worry. Allah, have you forgotten my ability? Penglai Mountain's Hui Yi smiled slyly. My ability is to control forever and for a moment. I have already recorded the moment when I was still a loli. I can reproduce it at any time. How about it? Do you want to see it? The lowly version of Penglai Mountain's Hui Yi. Asking if he wanted to see it or not, of course he wanted to. For a moment Wu Yan almost wavered. But when he saw the sly expression in Penglai Mountain's eyes, his heart suddenly turned cold. Intuition told Wu Yan that if he really answered yes, he would definitely be tricked by this two-faced princess. Thus Wu Yan flatly refused. Forget it. You should find someone else to see it. Is that so? Penglai Mountain's Hui Yi shook her head in disappointment. A trace of vexation surfaced in her eyes. Clearly it was because Wu Yan didn't fall for her trick. This made Wu Yan rejoice. All of a sudden, Patrice lifted her head and looked in a certain direction. She paused for a moment and knitted her brows. What's wrong? Noticing Patrice's change, Remilia asked. Then she turned to the direction Patrice was looking at just now. The others also looked over curiously. Soon after, everyone present saw another familiar figure flying towards them in mid-air. There were two palm-sized people floating beside him. Wu Yan's spirit jolted as he raised his hand and without thinking, he yelled out. Alice. Hearing someone calling her, Alice, who was flying over, turned around and met Wu Yan's gaze. Her pretty face quickly turned red. It couldn't be helped. Not long ago, when Wu Yan invited her to the banquet, she placed all her attention on Eve's heart, and ignored Wu Yan. As a result, she was viciously dealt with by Wu Yan. Alice still couldn't forget the scene where Wu Yan placed her in 18 different positions. In the end, she could only beg for mercy due to exhaustion. While Alice was furious, she also fiercely glared at Wu Yan. Even so, Alice obediently brought Shanghai and Penglai to land in front of Wu Yan's group. Alice didn't realize that she was getting more and more used to interacting with Wu Yan. She was no longer as distant as before. This made Wu Yan secretly delighted. If it continued like this, sooner or later, Alice would be willing to accompany him by his side, and it would be a matter of course. However, this joyful mood collapsed at the next moment. After landing in front of Wu Yan, Alice didn't look at Wu Yan immediately. Instead, she looked at Patrice. Wu Yan could only curse inwardly. These two girls with Yuri plots, they wouldn't quarrel, right? Chapter 1869. Not sure if they sensed something, but the moment Alice and Patrice exchanged glances, the surrounding girls quietened down. This wasn't the first time Remilia had witnessed Alice and Patrice, who were usually calm and indifferent. Whenever they met, they would quarrel with each other like needles against a wheat mang. Remilia felt a headache coming on. Gumming Diju seemed to have read some information from Alice and Patrice. He looked at Alice, Patrice and even Wu Yan with an odd gaze before retreating to the side with Spirit Wu Lukong and Flaming Cat Phosphor. As for Yonglin and Ling Xian, they chose to observe silently. Mao Pinglai's bright knight rolled his eyes and revealed an expression of watching a show. Even Fran and Gumming Diju, who were lying on Wu Yan's back, widened their eyes, waiting to see what would happen next. Seeing this group of despicable fellows choosing to remain silent, Wu Yan could only bitterly laugh and let Alice and Patrice go. Just when everyone thought that Alice and Patrice were going to quarrel like before, the two of them revealed helpless smiles at the same time. It was as if they had thought through something and gotten over it. "I thought you weren't coming." Patrice smiled faintly. "Fortunately, I'm not too late. Since you've invited me, of course I'll come." Alice nodded her head calmly, as though everything she had done before was just like a child playing around. "Moreover, wouldn't it be a loss if I didn't come to such a large-scale banquet?" "That's right. I don't know how long it has been since I attended such a large-scale banquet. In the past, such a banquet would only be held once a year at Boli Shrine, right? It's a pity that Boli Shrine hasn't held such a large ceremony for many years." "Indeed, it's a pity." Immediately, Alice and Patrice ignored the surrounding people and started chatting with each other. Moreover, they seemed to be having a good time, causing Remilia to be at a loss. What's going on?" This question was also what Wu Yan wanted to ask. Looking at Alice and Patrice, who are chatting like old friends, Wu Yan couldn't help but think of this possibility. Could it be that these two Yuri girls have gotten over it? Could it be that he was just smiling on the surface and secretly made an appointment to find a place to fight to the death later? While Wu Yan had such a thought, Patrice suddenly spoke to Alice. "Right, Marissa is over there with Princess Ling Meng. If you want to find her, you can go over there." "Marissa?" Alice was startled, her face was filled with curiosity. "Why should I find Marissa?" This time it was Patrice's turn to be startled. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "But didn't you have feelings for Marissa? I don't understand what you're talking about." As if she didn't want to hear anything, Alice interrupted Patrice and looked straight at her. "If we really want to talk about it, shouldn't you be the one looking for Marissa?" "How could that be?" Patrice's brows twitched. "Marissa and I are just ordinary friends." Patrice's words weren't forced at all. Anyone could tell that she wasn't lying. At the very least, she wasn't lying. Naturally, Alice also heard it. She narrowed her eyes. "But Marissa and I are also just ordinary friends." Similar to Patrice, Alice's words didn't feel like she was lying at all. Her credibility was at least 90%. In other words, because of a certain matter, the two of them had mistaken Marissa, who used to have a Yuri plot, as an ordinary friend. Because of this matter, they also mistakenly believed that the other party still had a Yuri plot towards Marissa. Simply put, the reason why Patrice and Alice didn't quarrel like before was because there was no longer a need to quarrel. Their orientations had been twisted by a certain wolf and they no longer coveted Marissa. Therefore, they couldn't be at each other's throats anymore. Then here comes the question. Since both of their orientations had changed, then who was the one who had changed their orientation? Even though they didn't know why the other party no longer coveted Marissa, Patrice and Alice sharply sensed who the problem was. They lifted their heads and shot their ice-cold gazes at Wu Yan. Wu Yan started sweating profusely when he heard Patrice and Alice talking to each other about what happened. Whether it was Patrice or Alice, both of them used to like Marissa. Now it seemed like they no longer had any feelings for Marissa. However, the one who changed them was him. Wu Yan had a rough idea of what would happen next. On the other side, upon witnessing Wu Yan's sweat-drenched appearance, Patrice and Alice instantly understood what was going on. Their gazes turned sharp. "Could it be that you also?" Toward Alice. "Could it be that you also?" Toward Patrice. These two sentences came out of Patrice and Alice's mouth at almost the same time. At the same time, Patrice and Alice understood what was going on. They fell into silence and their gazes toward each other were no longer as harmonious as before. Instead, their gazes were filled with the smell of gunpowder. "Actually, I know about the matter between you and Marissa." After a while, Patrice revealed a sincere smile. "Don't worry. I will support you." Please allow me to return those words to you. Alice neutralized Patrice's attack with an indifferent expression. Even though Marissa and I are just ordinary friends, we can still be considered neighbors. If there's anything I can help you with, don't hesitate to tell me. I will definitely help if it's within my means. It's a pity that Marissa and I are also just ordinary friends. Moreover, I feel that the two of you are quite compatible. That must be your misconception. I feel that since Marissa often goes to your place, she should have a good impression of you. Marissa only goes to my place to steal books. Perhaps she only pretends to steal books and secretly visits you. What about you? Didn't you say before that you always wanted to take time out to play with Marissa? You two should have a good relationship, right? Of course our relationship is good, but it can't be compared to the two of you. No, you must be too polite. No, you must be too modest. Patrice and Alice simultaneously revealed a bright smile that didn't contain a trace of a smile. The content of their conversation changed from a joyous conversation to an intense battle of offense and defense. Remilia's blank expression became more and more intense. What the hell is going on? Era. Mount Penglai covered her mouth and laughed. That's interesting, sigh. Gu Ming sighed as he glanced at Wu Yan, who is sweating profusely. What a grave sin. Wu Yan laughed dryly. He could only laugh dryly. Unknowingly, time passed by. At this moment, the demons that filled the empty space in front of Bori Shrine quietened down and cast their gazes forward. Wu Yan stood in the hallway of Bori Shrine under the gazes of all the demons present. It was as if he was standing on a stage. He looked at the familiar and unfamiliar people and demons below and closed his eyes. Thank you very much for coming to this banquet. I believe many of you have more or less heard of my name. Here, let me reintroduce myself. My name is Yakumo Bai. I am the head of Yakumo family and also the housekeeper of Scarlet Devil Mansion. Looking at the demons below, Wu Yan's face slowly revealed a smile. Truth be told, although I have the surname Yakumo, I am actually an outsider. I have only been in Fantasy Village for less than 10 days. During this period of time, I've met a lot of people, encountered a lot of things, traveled to a lot of places and caused a lot of trouble. But because of this, I've also made a lot of connections, felt the beauty of the fantasy town and seen a lot of interesting things. It makes me feel that the fantasy town is really a very incredible place. Wu Yan recalled what happened to him in the short span of 10 days in Gensokyo. He grinned as he looked in a certain direction. There, Remilia, Fran, Patrice, Zui, Alice, Guming Diju, Ling Wu, Lukong, Flaming Cat, Mount Penglai, Kagaya, Yonglin Bai, and Ling Xian were all standing there. They seemed to have resonated with Wu Yan's words and their expressions softened. Ling Meng, Marissa, and Fumaru-sensei were also standing on the other side. They seemed to be reminiscing. In the sky, in a pitch-black spatial crack, Zilon and Qing were there as well. They had sincere smiles on their faces which calmed people down involuntarily. Wu Yan took in a deep breath. Today's banquet is not for any other reason but for this fantasy village that has touched me a lot. I hope that this banquet will leave everyone with beautiful memories and let everyone feel the incredible things that only belong to Fantasy Village. Wu Yan raised his hand high up in the air. Let us enjoy this incredible Fantasy Village at this banquet. Oh! At this moment, cheers resounded in the sky of Fantasy Village and didn't die down for a long time. Chapter 1870. Night gradually fell, but the liveliness of the Boli Shrine did not decrease at all. At this moment, in the open space in front of the Boli Shrine, no matter where it was, there was a picnic cloth spread there, almost covering the open space in front of the Boli Shrine. And on these picnic cloths of various colors, hot dishes and bottles of wine had already occupied every picnic cloth. The monsters sat in 2s and 3s like this, laughing and chatting while eating and drinking in a lively manner. Perhaps no one realized that almost 70% of the demons who gathered in 2s and 3s, laughing and chatting, were not even friends. They had only met each other once, and some had not even met each other before this banquet. They were pure strangers who had not even met each other before this banquet. It was this group of monsters who were strangers to each other at this moment. They were like relatives and friends who had known each other for many years. They chatted and got to know each other, and they even put their arms around each other's shoulders. This scene could only happen in this inconceivable fantasy town. Whether it was humans or monsters, at this moment they forgot their identity, forgot their race, forgot their friendship, forgot everything, and only enjoyed themselves for the sake of happiness. Under such circumstances, in the sky above the Boli shrine, for almost the entire day, there were all kinds of noises echoing. But among these noises there was laughter. It did not make people feel that it was noise, and it was annoying. Fortunately, before this banquet, Wu Yan had already prepared a variety of dishes and wine. In addition, before the banquet began, Zhang Yi had also helped to prepare a lot. Even though there were many monsters who came to the banquet, there was always enough food, and it did not dampen everyone's spirits. Of course, no matter how abundant it was. Even if food was provided infinitely, the stomachs of the people who came to the banquet were limited. Even the monsters with special physiques were the same. Thus, when night fell, the sky turned dark. In the open space in front of the Boli shrine, there were already many monsters with bitter faces. They held their big bellies and looked like they could not take it anymore. And those who were laughing and chatting with those who were full, but still had energy to spare, simply stood up. He allowed them to rest as he walked towards the tablecloths below. He continued to drink in big gulps and laughed loudly. He was having a great time. In addition to food, drinking was also a problem. They had been drinking since the morning, and by noon many of them had already collapsed to the ground with flushed faces. They even burped from time to time as if they were in a drunken stupor. There was even a silly smile on their faces. Those who were still awake continued to play from noon until late at night. Some people who woke up in the middle of the night continued to drink, and naturally they were going to faint anyway, so they might as well just get drunk. In this place, some people liked the atmosphere of drinking. Some people liked to be drunk. Some people just kept drinking. Some people simply lay down on the ground and fell into a deep sleep. Wu Yan had already prepared for all of this before the banquet began. Moreover, in every banquet, there were bound to be people drunk all over the ground, and the way to deal with it had already been decided long ago. Thus, under Wu Yan's guidance, every time a drunk person passes out, the Yoshi maids of Scarlet Devil Mansion would bring thick clothes or blankets and cover the drunk person or monster on the ground. Then they would let the drunk person go to sleep. In any case, most of the people who came to the banquet were monsters, and it was impossible for them to catch a cold or have a fever from sleeping on the ground for a night, right? Just like this, the banquet was still lively. Sitting in a corner, Wu Yan held a wine plate full of wine in his hand, and took small sips as he looked around. Oh, come, he continued drinking. Lying on Wu Yan's left were Remilia and Guming Dijue. These two girls were at odds from the beginning, as if they wanted to continue the battle that day, and kept drinking, and in the end naturally they fell there drunk and could not get up again. Big brother. On Wu Yan's right, Furan and Guming Dijue were also lying down, sleeping very comfortably with faint smiles on their faces. Unlike her elder sister, these two girls were only tired because they had been running around the banquet hall all day. I won't lose. Look at my power. On the side, Patrice and Alice also laid down, looking at their flushed faces. It seems like they drank quite a bit as well. Moreover, they were also competing, even more so than Remilia and Guming Dijue. As for Spirit Crow Lu Kong and Flame Cat Lin, they were also unable to bear the effects of the alcohol, and had been lying down since noon, sleeping soundly until now. Only Sakuya was left alone. Looking at the drunk eldest miss, the tired second miss, and the drunk Patrice, he had a conflicted expression. He seemed to want to bid farewell to his mistress and return home to rest. But before he could say anything, he was pulled away by Marissa and Sensei Marumi. Right now, Sui Yi is still being persuaded to drink by Princess Ling Meng, Marissa and Fumaru. Looking at his swaying appearance, he should not be drunk for long. Sigh. Wu Yan helplessly shook his head as he looked at this pitiful scene. He gently picked up some clothes and covered the bodies of the drunk and sleeping girls with them. In the sky, a dazzling full moon had unknowingly risen. The clamor continued. Some of the demons who were not drunk were still chatting with each other and eating and drinking. Compared to the morning, the scene was a little quieter, but it was still very lively. Looking at the beautiful full moon in the distance, Wu Yan picked up a wine plate and poured wine into it. While admiring the moon, he continued to sip the wine in his hand. Not long later, light footsteps could be heard. The person who came did not have the slightest intention to avoid arousing suspicion and directly sat beside Wu Yan, allowing that beautiful black hair to enter Wu Yan's eyes. Although he didn't turn his head to look, in his impression among all the people he knows here, There is only one person who has such beautiful long black hair that cascades down like a waterfall. Moreover, he personally combed this long black hair before. Wu Yan chuckled. He didn't stop looking at the full moon, he didn't even turn his head around. Do you want to drink? Forget it. Like a dignified princess, the girl did not have any intention to play around, her tone was tranquil. I just drank a little with Yonglin, but perhaps it's because I haven't drunk for too long, my alcohol tolerance can't be compared to before. Wu Yan didn't try to persuade him any further. He just filled his own plate to the brim. Mao Penglai did not reply. She raised her head and looked at the full moon that was emitting a silver light. Strange ripples appeared in her beautiful eyes. It's still as beautiful as ever. Is that so? Wu Yan gently shook the wine in the wine plate in his hand. You can't see the moon on the moon, right? But you can see the ground. Mount Penglai's face was serene as if he was reminiscing. It's different in the moon capital. You don't have to wait until nighttime to see the moon. In the moon capital, you can see the ground at any time. Perhaps it's because I've seen too much of the beauty of the ground and the coldness of the moon capital that I'm looking forward to life on the ground. That might be the case. Wu Yan closed his eyes and smiled, no longer answering. After a long time, Mount Penglai's Hui Yi suddenly spoke. You're planning to leave the land of fantasy, right? Can you tell? Wu Yan was not surprised. He knew that he could not hide it from Mount Penglai's Hui Yi. Even if he could hide it from Mount Penglai's Hui Yi, he could not hide it from Yonglin. Even if I say yes, you won't leave with me, right? Including this time, we've only met 3 times. Mount Penglai's Hui Yi said with a smile that was not a smile. Do you think that just because we've met 3 times I'll be able to follow you or follow you to another world? It's because I don't think so that I didn't mention this to you. Wu Yan's expression was still calm as he sipped his wine and said this. But you came to find me at this time. This proves that you're not that against it, right? Perhaps. Mount Penglai Hui nodded his head in agreement. He stood up, turned around, and as he walked out he lightly left behind such a sentence. I'll wait for the day when you can take me away. Looking at the full moon in the sky and listening to those clear words, Wu Yan's eyes began to ripple. He was a little drunk. Chapter 1871. When the moon rose to the highest position in the night sky, the clamor that had been resounding in the sky above the Boli shrine had disappeared without a trace, as if it had been completely extinguished. Ignoring those who were already drunk, those who were still sober had quieted down. They held their wine plates, raised their heads and looked at the night sky. Except for the full moon, there was no light at all. In the endless pitch-black night sky, all the sober monsters saw it. An extremely weak red stream of light, as weak as the flame on a match, suddenly rose from the back of the Boli shrine, broke through the air, and flew toward the deep night sky at a speed that was neither fast nor slow. Boom! Along with such a loud noise, the pitch-black night sky was instantly illuminated by an inexplicable light source. An incomparably bright and colorful flower exploded in the sky, and at the same time, a beautiful flower-like picture was imprinted in everyone's eyes. It was a firework. A firework that was bright and dazzling to the extreme, enough to cover the night sky in everyone's field of vision. When the firework exploded in the night sky, everyone present felt a ringing in their ears and a tremor in their chests. Their hearts stopped beating in an instant. And before the bright and dazzling flower of light disappeared from the eyes of the monsters, another loud noise, another explosion, and a bright flower of light bloomed in the night sky. Boom, 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 boom. Not long after, the entire night sky above the Boli shrine was covered with bright fireworks, blooming in the sky along with the loud noises that rang out one after another. The pupils and faces of the monsters were all rendered colorful by the colors of the fireworks in the night sky. It looked so brilliant that everyone present seemed to be in a daze. They quietly looked at the fireworks blooming in the sky. They had forgotten everything else. As the priestess of the Boli shrine and the manager of the fantasy paradise, Ling Meng was drunk and unconscious, so she regretfully missed this scene. Marissa and soul-shooting Maru were also drunk and fell to the ground. He was snoring loudly. I can't do it again. Many of the monsters had been drinking for the entire day. There was so much wine it was enough to make all the demons drunk. Some even drank until they vomited. After vomiting and drinking again, even their faces had turned green. However, the demons who were still sober were extremely glad that they didn't fall drunk and miss this wonderful night of fireworks. These fireworks were also the signal that announced the end of the banquet. At some point in time the fireworks ended. The drunk Gu Ming Di Ju and the sleeping Gu Ming Di Love were carried back to the underground world by Spirit Wu Lu Kong and Flaming Catlin, who finally woke up. Ling Xian is also drunk. Even Mount Pinglai's Bright Knight is a little drunk. Under the care of Yonglin, the only sober one, they leave quietly. As for Ling Meng, Marissa and Fumi Maru, the three of them were directly thrown into the Boli Shrine, where they continued to sleep. The rest of the demons also began to bid farewell to the others. Then they brought along those they were familiar with and left in groups of 3 to 5. When they left, the demons didn't have a trace of reluctance. In the fantasy paradise, there would be a banquet every once in a while. Thus, there was no need to be reluctant at the end of the banquet. Thus, after a joyous farewell, the demons left the Boli Shrine with a face full of joy. At this point, the banquet that was held for the sake of this incredible fantasy land was finally completed. It had come to an end. Ugh! Holding their heads, Patrice and Alice staggered as they walked. Their bodies swayed as though they could fall at any moment. Before the fireworks started, Patrice and Alice woke up. Perhaps it was an agreement, but they miraculously woke up at the same time. Thus, Patrice and Alice were fortunate enough to witness the rarely seen fireworks in the fantasy paradise. However, even after waking up, the hangover headache still affected Patrice and Alice. The two of them could barely walk and couldn't fly as they trudged forward step by step. In order to take care of Patrice and Alice, Wu Yan and Zhang Yi, who were carrying Fran and Remilia, purposely slowed down their pace. They walked on both sides of Patrice and Alice, taking care of them while walking at a tortoise's pace. Wu Yan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Can't I just use spatial teleportation to bring you back? Why do you have to walk?" Muck. Patrice muttered cute words as she held her head. Her face was still red, but she stubbornly shook her head. "I haven't reached the stage where I can't walk." After speaking, Patrice shot a glance at Alice beside her, allowing Alice to put on a brave front and speak. Obviously, the two of them wanted to compete with each other. That's why they didn't let Wu Yan carry them. Took them a lot of effort to walk. Wu Yan and Zhang Yi glanced at each other and could only reveal a bitter smile. Fortunately, Zhang Yi didn't get drunk by Ling Meng and Marissa. Otherwise, who knows what kind of mess it would be. Looking at Patrice and Alice wobbling as they walk, Kuya's delicate face is flushed red. Wu Yan thought for a bit before he spoke up. "Oh right, let me tell you something." Alice and Sakuya looked at Wu Yan in confusion. Patrice rolled her eyes at Wu Yan, which is a rare sight to see. "Don't tell me you're going to consume some troublesome medicine to obtain someone's blood and destroy their home?" Blood. Alice knitted her brows in confusion. However, Wu Yan, Patrice and Zhang Yi didn't explain anything to her. Because Wu Yan's next sentence caused everyone's heart to tremble. It should be the opposite. Wu Yan looked ahead and didn't look at Patrice, Alice and Zhang Yi's expressions. "I have found the 5 drops of blood essence with mystical powers. It is time to leave Fantasyland." Leave Fantasyland? Patrice, Alice and Zhang Yi stopped in their tracks. Wu Yan also stopped in his tracks but didn't look at the girls' expressions. He looked ahead as though he didn't want to see a trace of sadness on their faces. On the other hand, Patrice, Alice and Zhui Ye's expressions were constantly changing. Their emotions were fluctuating up and down. None of them said a word, causing the scene to become strangely silent. Phew. In the end, it was Patrice who returned to her usual self and nodded nonchalantly. "Are you coming back?" Alice and Raven Knight didn't say anything, but both of them became alert in an instant. Under the gazes of the 3 girls, Wu Yan nodded his head with an unquestionable attitude. "Of course." Then, Zhang Yi hesitated for a moment before asking, "How long will Lord Bai be away?" "I'm not sure." Wu Yan shook his head. "But it won't exceed a year. I will definitely return within a year." Penglai Mountain's Bright Knight was Wu Yan's summon. Since Penglai Mountain's Bright Knight didn't follow Wu Yan to the Spalier world and chose to stay in this world, the time in this world wouldn't be completely frozen. Instead, it would be 100 times slower than the time in Wu Yan's world. No matter how long Wu Yan spent in another world, the barrier in Fantasyland would disappear after a year. At that time, Wu Yan wouldn't just sit by and watch. He would definitely return to Fantasyland. Therefore, a year was the longest time limit. A year. Patrice, Alice, and Zhang Yi heaved a sigh of relief. A year wasn't too long for Patrice, who had lived for at least 100 years, and Alice, who had a long lifespan. As for Zhang Yi, he was an ordinary human and didn't have as long a lifespan as Alice and Patrice. However, a year wasn't considered long in a human's lifespan. Therefore, a year wasn't something he couldn't accept. Seeing the three girls heaving a sigh of relief, Wu Yan also heaved a sigh of relief. Naturally, Alice and Bei were happy that he didn't make them sad. Chapter 1872. Fantasy Village, Red Devil Mansion. Passing through the long corridor of the Red Devil Mansion that was surrounded by bright red without many windows, Ruo Yi came to the front of a staircase. Ruo Yi directly climbed up the stairs, walked out of the Red Devil Mansion, and came to the roof of the Red Devil Mansion. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Just as she reached the roof, before the night wind could blow on Ruo Ye's body, the high bell tower that belonged to the Red Devil Mansion sounded midnight, representing the passing of a day and the arrival of a new day. The pleasant sound of the bell mixed with the sound of the wind and spread in all directions. Only then did the slightly cold night wind gently blow on Ruo Ye's body, causing her bright silver hair to flutter. The skirt of the maid dress also rose and fell with the arrival of the wind, and the corners of the skirt swayed in a beautiful circle. This scene could not be described as not beautiful. At this moment, the soul-stirring beauty Ruo Yi reached out her hand and casually pushed the hair that fluttered up and down in front of her eyes behind her ear. She raised her eyes and looked forward. There, after coming to the Red Devil Mansion, he had been wearing a suit that could be used as both casual clothes and formal clothes. Wu Yan, who had changed into an ordinary black shirt, trousers, and a black coat, stood there with his back to Ruo Yi. As if he did not notice Ruo Ye's arrival, he looked into the distance. Looking at the figure that was looking into the distance, Ruo Yi unknowingly became infatuated. It had to be said that Wu Yan was really suitable to exist at night. This was not to say that Wu Yan's character was darker and shameful, but that Wu Yan's body emitted a deep and mysterious aura from time to time. Under the influence of the night, he was like the king of the night. It made people reluctant to part with him. And Ruo Yi also knew. The person in front of her was indeed the true king of the night. Because he was the fantasy village and even the entire world. The one and only true ancestor of vampires. The person she served was originally a noble among vampires. Jaya was already used to the aura of vampires. In addition, an extremely important position in his heart had been taken away by the man in front of him in a short period of 10 days. Bu Yi couldn't stop himself from being obsessed with that figure. Just as Lu Yi was reluctant to part with the figure that almost merged with the night, the owner of the figure finally couldn't help but chuckle. He spoke. "Since you are here, why don't you come over?" Only then did Ruo Yi come to her senses, as if she was startled awake. After realizing her performance just now, her pretty face couldn't help but blush slightly, but she still walked forward. However, Zui Yi stopped some distance away from Wu Yan. This was Dark Knight's position. Zui Yi had always positioned himself as a servant, not as a friend or lover who could sit on the same level as Wu Yan. Even if one day, Zui Yi would follow Wu Yan as a lover, she would never emphasize her position by Wu Yan's side as a lover. It wasn't that Zui Yi felt inferior, or that she didn't think she was worthy of Wu Yan. However, this kind of positioning was the only way for Zui Yi to truly express himself. She would always be the perfect and chic head maid. There was no one else. The soft moonlight sprinkled from the sky, shining on the man and woman who were like master and servant. Tonight, there were no bright stars in the night sky of the fantasy village, nor was there a mysterious light source. There was only the round moon emitting soft light. The cool night breeze was like a cold breath, drilling into the noses of Wu Yan and Zui Yi, but both of them were staring at the night scene in front of them. The bright night sky, the walls of the Red Devil Mansion, the quiet courtyard, the huge clock tower, even the scenery of the entire fantasy village seemed to be seen by the man and woman who were like master and servant at this moment. Everything was presented in front of Wu Yan and Zui Yi. Wu Yan didn't look back to look. Zui Yi didn't express all the words she wanted to say. It was as if thousands of words were no longer important. On this night of parting, Zui Yi spat out these words. "Don't you want to tell Miss and Miss?" With Remilia's current good impression of Wu Yan, if she knew that Wu Yan left without saying goodbye, she would definitely be furious or even depressed for a while. According to Wu Yan himself, this time he wouldn't take Fran with him. In other words, Wu Yan would let Fran stay by Remilia's side. Otherwise, if her most important brother and sister left at the same time, Remilia wouldn't be sitting in the Red Devil Mansion. It was more likely that she would cause a ruckus in the fantasy village and look for Wu Yan and Fran. In any case, Penglai Mountain's Hui Yi was also here and couldn't be taken away. Letting Fran stay might not be a bad choice. But at the same time, if she knew that Wu Yan left without saying goodbye, wouldn't Fran cause a huge ruckus? Those two girls definitely won't let me go so easily. Wu Yan sighed faintly. I will be back in a year, it's not like I won't come back. Before I leave, I don't want those two girls to be too sad. Shi Yi was silent for a short while before he spoke again. Then what about Miss Patrice and Miss Alice? Don't you want to say goodbye to them before leaving? What about Miss Ling Meng and Miss Marissa? What about Lord Bai's friends in Earth Spirit Hall? Don't you plan on informing them? Since I don't plan on telling those two girls, I naturally can't favor one and discriminate against the other. Otherwise, Remy and Fran will definitely feel unbalanced. Wu Yan couldn't help but smile. So I'll have to trouble you to inform them, yes? Zui Yi thought for a while before nodding. Zui Yi understands. After saying this, there was another indescribable silence. It wasn't that Wu Yan had nothing to say to Zui Yi, nor that Zui Yi didn't want to say anything to Wu Yan. It was just that the two of them had the same thought. 1,000 words couldn't compare to a simple greeting at the moment of reunion. Since that was the case, it was better to not say anything and leave everything for the moment of reunion. Not long after, a pitch-black spatial crack filled with ferocious eyeballs appeared above the Scarlet Devil Mansion. 3 tall and petite figures walked out from it. They jumped up and lightly landed in front of Wu Yan and Zui Yi. Looking at the leader of the 3 figures, Zui Yi cried out in surprise. Devil Sage. The newcomers were Violet's Shikigami and Violet's Shikigami, blue and orange. Violet smiled and nodded at Zui Yi before looking at Wu Yan and shrugging. Looks like you're ready to leave. What about you? Wu Yan shrugged. You're not going to stay here? Back then, when Witchboli borrowed the power of the dragon god to build the Great Barrier, I was also the one who assisted and witnessed everything. Even if someone else were to complete this job, I would still be responsible. Z replied vaguely. Besides, we're used to running around with you. Wu Yan couldn't help but laugh. Then let's set out. Yukari nodded nonchalantly. On the other hand, Lon stepped forward and bowed to Wu Yan. Lord White, I'll leave Lord Violet to you. Sorry to trouble you, Meow. Orange quickly bowed as well. Lord White. Zui Ye's eyes flickered before he bowed as well. I wish you all the best. Wu Yan quietly looked at Sakuya. Both of them stared at each other for a while, neither of them looked away. Until a certain moment, Wu Yan closed his eyes and didn't say a word. He disappeared with the silent Violet. Zui Yi, blue and orange, stared in the direction the two disappeared in. They didn't react for a long time. No one noticed that at the entrance of the Scarlet Devil Mansion, several figures were standing in the corridor. They were Remilia, who was supposed to be drunk, Fran, who was sound asleep, Alice, and Patrice, who was in her library. Fran hugged Remilia tightly and held back her tears. She didn't cry and only asked with a choked voice. Big brother will come back, right? Of course. Remilia nodded heavily and hugged Fran tightly. Her voice was firm. He'll definitely come back. Patrice and Alice looked at the pair of sisters who were tightly hugging each other and exchanged glances with the same expression in their eyes. Reluctance. But more than that, there was determination. Patrice and Alice also believed in him. Wu Yan will definitely do it again. Back to Fantasy Village. Chapter 1873. Behemoth Forest, capital of alternate generations. It's a bright and sunny morning. In such a cold morning with cold winds blowing from time to time, it was believed that everyone would subconsciously resist leaving their beds the moment they woke up. Although the temperature isn't that cold, it's only around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius. In such a temperature, ordinary people might have to wear some clothes to resist the cold before they could walk outside. However, for those cultivators with a certain level of cultivation, that is, those warriors and mages with combat chi and mana flowing in their bodies, even if they wore summer clothes, they wouldn't feel the slightest bit cold. After all, when fighting aura and magic power flowed through the body of the user to a certain extent, they would provide some protection to the body. Unfortunately, in this spalier world where only warriors and mages can cultivate, there are people who don't have impetus and mana flowing through their body. They aren't warriors or mages, but they have power that ordinary warriors and mages can't match. Thus, all of them gathered in the mystical capital of a different generation. The barrier of the capital of alternate generations would provide a certain level of protection to the city within. For example, the barrier allows the capital of alternate generations to maintain a relatively warm temperature. It allows the temperature in the capital of alternate generations to not fluctuate too much. If the sun is too strong, the light will be controlled to a suitable range. But 11 or 12 degrees Celsius isn't that cold. Therefore, the barrier covering the entire capital of otherworldly beings didn't undergo much adjustment, causing the entire capital of otherworldly beings to be filled with a chilly air. Under such circumstances, the Misaka sisters who came to the streets put on their autumn clothes and went out to continue their lives in the capital of otherworldly beings. Of course, in this relatively cold weather, the weather was very cold. In the morning, many of the Misaka sisters chose to lie in their beds and didn't want to come out. It's the same phenomenon. It's also happening in the heart of alternate generations. While the rest of the girls were still on the roof of the heart of alternate generations undergoing their transformations. In the heart of alternate generations, only a handful of 4 girls who had completed their transformation could move. The president of the student council of the White Emperor College from the world of the Whirlwind Butler, Gui Chuju. Hailing from the world of magical porn, Tokuwadai's electric princess, Misaka Mikoto, came from the world of heavenly objects. The strongest strategic angel in history, Ikaros. There was also Astrea, the all-purpose angel who came from the world of heavenly object. It was these 4 girls who could be said to be famous to a certain extent, but at this time, their actions were quite shocking. A certain president whose swordsmanship had already reached the level of a god, was half awake and half asleep. He wrapped himself in a blanket like a dumpling, vexed because he didn't know where to find autumn clothes to wear. A certain popular idol of Tokuwadai whose electric shock ability was equally godly, also hid under his blanket in his room because of the cold temperature. Like a tortoise, he refused to come out for a long time. A certain natural all-purpose angel who wasn't afraid of the cold, sat on the bed in her room. The ahog on her head swayed back and forth as she stared blankly at the sky outside the window. No one knew what she was thinking. As for the last one, a certain glutton who could never be full, she was the only one who came out of her room in the heart of alternate generations and came to the living room. However, the king of gluttony who could never be full, indicated that he was also distressed. Because she was squatting in a corner of the living room with her hands on her knees, staring at a square object in front of her. She pouted and her delicate body was trembling. In the living room there was a fridge used by Wu Yan and the girls to store drinks, desserts and snacks. Now Astrea was squatting there, staring at the opened fridge. Her eyes were filled with struggle. Taking a closer look, the usual drinks, desserts and snacks in the fridge had all been used up. Only a round object was left, sitting alone in the fridge. A watermelon. A very ordinary watermelon. This ordinary watermelon was the only thing left in the fridge. Astrea was starving, so she ran out of her room to look for something to eat. When she opened the fridge and saw the watermelon, her eyes were glued to it. Her eyes were filled with desire and struggle as she stared at the watermelon. Astrea's delicate body trembled, even her lips were trembling. Can I eat it? At first glance it sounded like nonsense. But if someone in the know knew about this, they would be shocked that the glutton Astrea was able to resist eating the food placed in front of her when she was hungry. By the time they realized what was going on, they would have a look of understanding on their face. There was no other reason. This watermelon is Ikaro's favorite. Ikaros has a strange hobby. She likes watermelons. It's not because she likes the taste, it's also not because she likes its existence. It's just because she likes the round watermelon. The watermelon in front of her was placed in the fridge last night because Ikaros didn't want it to rot. Now it's the thing that Astrea is struggling with. Eat it. Ikaros is bound to get angry, and when she gets angry, other than Wu Yan, no one can stop her. She might even go on a rampage and destroy the gen's heart. Don't eat it. But Astrea is hungry. Unconsciously, Astrea reached out her trembling hand towards the watermelon in the fridge. Just as she was about to touch the watermelon, she pulled her hand back as if she was frightened. She shook her head vigorously. No. I can't. Ikaru-senpai will kill me. Astrea tried to close the fridge after she said that. But, rumble. A drawn-out voice came from Astrea's stomach. Astria's resolute expression crumbled. She looked at Watermelon with teary eyes. She seemed to be wavering. If it's just a whiff, it should be fine, right? Astria gulped. She didn't think about the taste of the watermelon. She slowly reached her trembling hand towards the fridge. Just as she was about to touch the watermelon, the image of Ikaros entering Sky Empress mode after knowing her watermelon was destroyed surfaced in Astria's mind. She couldn't help but twitch a little. But I can't. I'll die. I'll definitely die. Astria couldn't control her body anymore. She reached out her hand and grabbed onto the hand that was reaching into the fridge. She struggled in pain. Don't blame Astria for making a fuss. Mikoto once said that Ikaros doesn't seem like a saintess. She doesn't even know if there's anything she likes. Astria heard it from Wu Yen, who refuted Mikoto's words. Who said that? Ikaros loves watermelons. She loves watermelons so much that if someone destroys them, even if it's her family or acquaintances, she'll go crazy. Not only Mikoto, even Hinajiku and the other girls laughed out loud when they heard Wu Yen saying that they can't imagine Ikaros getting angry. Astria was the same. Well, it can't be helped. Other than Wu Yen, Ikaros's expression doesn't change in the slightest no matter what she's facing. But it's one thing to not imagine it, it's another to not believe it. Astria wasn't as attached to her master as Ikaros was. She wouldn't leave her master's side for even a second. Regardless of love, loyalty, or obedience, Astria was on the same level as Ikaros. That's why Astria didn't think she'd get lucky. She covered her mouth and whimpered as if she was afraid her mouth wouldn't listen to her. Translation: I have to leave this dangerous place. Astria was about to close the fridge when she heard a suspicious voice. What are you doing? Chapter 1874. What are you doing? The voice came from behind Astria. Astria's hand that was reaching for the fridge froze. Her face turned pale. You. As expected, Astria, who thought she was captured, let out a sorrowful cry. The pure white wings on her back flapped and she fell to the ground like she was paralyzed. But before Astria could fall to the ground, a hand reached out from the side and wrapped around Astria's slender waist. After that, the voice that was filled with doubt earlier was now filled with helplessness. What the hell are you doing? Astria was shocked. Astria was familiar with the voice. Even the temperature of the hand around her waist was familiar. Astria recognized the owner of the hand. Astria raised her head in fear. She saw a pair of wine-red eyes filled with helplessness and helplessness. A face she would never forget. Astria's pale face was replaced with joy. Master. Do you still remember that I am your master? Wu Yen said in an annoyed tone. You looked like you saw a ghost when you heard my voice. I thought you didn't recognize me anymore. Wu Yen helped Astria up so that she wouldn't fall down again. Then he let go of Astria. Only then did Astria notice that Wu Yen isn't the only one in the hall. There's also a girl with waist-length golden hair holding a paper fan. She's also looking at Astria with a helpless expression. Sister Yukari? Era, I thought Astria-chan didn't notice us. Yukari chuckled when she saw Astria's shocked expression. She didn't seem to be able to react to the situation. Thank goodness. I'm not completely invisible. Astria heard that. Astria finally realized what was going on. Wu Yen and Yukari are back. Alas, before Astria could cry out in joy, a voice came from the other side of the hall. In the hallway, a series of hurried footsteps and anxious shouts echoed in the air. What's going on? A voice came from behind. Several figures appeared at the entrance of the hall. Needless to say, it was Chuju, Mikoto and Ikaros. But this time, Chuju was still wrapped in a thick blanket. Mikoto was still in her pajamas. The only one who was dressed properly was Ikaros. The three girls must have heard Astria's cries and rushed over. They didn't even have time to tidy up their attire. Hinajiku, Mikoto and Ikaros saw Wu Yen and Yukari standing next to Astria when they entered the hall. Master. Ikaros, who was still as calm as an ancient well a second ago, now had an uncontrollable ripple in her indigo pupils. Hinajiku exclaimed in surprise. And Yukari? Yukari. You're back? Mikoto's face was also filled with shock. How did you guys get back so fast? Haha. It was indeed a little fast. Wu Yen stayed in Gensokyo for less than a month. He only stayed in there for a couple of days. With the time ratio of 1, 100. A dozen days wasn't even half a day in Silveria's time. Only 3 to 4 hours had passed. Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, and Astria just sent Wu Yen, Yukari, and Furan away early in the morning. Chuju and Mikoto went back to sleep. When they woke up, Wu Yen and Yukari were back. Ikaros and Astria, who didn't need to sleep, weren't surprised. Unlike Chuju and Mikoto, who woke up to Wu Yen and Yukari's return. After regaining her senses, Mikoto was the first to ask with uncertainty. Mission completed? Wu Yen and Yukari looked at each other and shrugged. I guess you can say that. Where's Furan? Hinajiku furrowed her brows. Why don't I see her? Well. Wu Yen scratched his cheek and sat down on the sofa. He poured himself a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. Furan is staying in Fantasyland with her sister for a while. So it's like that. Mikoto nodded thoughtfully. She looked at Yukari and asked curiously, Yukari, why don't you stay in your house for a while? Before I came to this world and became Yen Yan's summon, I spent most of my time in Fantasyland. Yukari replied nonchalantly. Well, we have plenty of time ahead of us. Chuju and Mikoto didn't know what Yukari meant by plenty of time ahead of us. However, Yukari didn't seem to have any intention of explaining, so they didn't ask. Oh right, I heard Astria moaning loudly in the room just now. Hinajiku remembered why she rushed over in a hurry and looked at Astria. Asteria-chan, what happened? Huh? Astria, who was still in a daze, jumped in fright. She shrieked out loud. Don't kill me. Huh? Hinajiku's face was filled with confusion. Not just Hinajiku, even Wu Yen, Mikoto, and Ikaros, who snuck up behind Wu Yen like she's on standby, are all confused. Even Yukari, who is known as the sage, doesn't know what's going on. Don't kill me? What do you mean by that? Astria shook her head like a rattled drum when she regained her senses. No, it's nothing. I didn't mean to eat the watermelon. Ugh. Everyone was speechless. Is that self-destruction? As expected of an idiot with an IQ lower than 9. That's great. Both Hinajiku and Mikoto rolled their eyes at the same time, yawned, waved their hands and walked towards their rooms. Let's go back and change. Hinajiku and Mikoto disappeared into the hallway, leaving behind Astria, who was sweating profusely and looking at Ikaros with a terrified expression. Before Astria could turn around, a hand landed on her shoulder. Astria froze. Yua. Astria's sorrowful wail echoed throughout the heart of generations once more. Just like that, a lively and peaceful day passed by. Endless darkness covered the clear sky, enveloping the entire Spalier world in darkness. Today, the behemoth forest didn't give off any ominous aura. Logically speaking, a place like the behemoth forest is filled with vicious demonic beasts. No matter how one tries to disguise themselves, they shouldn't be able to hide the ominous aura. But today the behemoth forest is no different from a normal forest. The smell of demonic beasts that used to permeate the air has mostly disappeared. It's as if most of the demonic beasts in the behemoth forest are no longer in the behemoth forest. When midnight arrived, a silhouette rushed over from outside the behemoth forest. The silhouette seemed to be enchanted with some sort of magic that boosted her speed. She rushed towards the behemoth forest and stopped right in front of the behemoth forest. Moonlight shone down from the sky and shrouded the silhouette standing in front of the behemoth forest. Her face was covered in sweat, her breathing was ragged, and her eyes were filled with exhaustion. She wore a robe befitting of a sorcerer, but it wasn't a terrifying black. Instead, it was a beautiful silver-white robe. The silhouette had long black hair that reached her waist. She looked to be around 17 or 18 years old. She was very young, but her face was so beautiful that it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call her a beauty capable of causing the downfall of a city. If Wu Yen and the other girls were here, they would definitely recognize this girl. Mei Lilu? Lori. The only daughter of the Ailu Empire's #1 family, the Lori family. It's Lulu, the girl who is still studying at the Spalier World Academy. However, on Lulu's delicate face, there was not only a strong sense of anxiety, but also a great sense of fear. I must find him quickly. Raising her eyes and looking at the eerily silent forest, Lulu mustered her courage, wiped her sweat and tears, and without hesitation, rushed into this dangerous place.